Chapter 128. Feeling the endless sharpness of the golden light beam, Uchiha Sasuke's face changed, and his eyelids couldn't help but twitch. Anyone can see the hidden fear in his eyes. The move in front of him is obviously a dojutsu, and the power is extremely great, enough to easily split the world. It can be imagined that the amount of dojutsu consumed is definitely much more than Chibaku Tensei. However, what made Uchiha Sasuke speechless is that Dustless is too much of a monster. The previous battle should have consumed a lot of dojutsu, and now he can use such a shocking move like Golden Will Reincarnation Explosion. It seems that there is no limit at all. It seems that I can only fight hard. His eyes suddenly emitted a burst of light. Uchiha Sasuke's eyes surged with killing intent. Facing the golden light beam in Dustless's hand, his face was full of eagerness. Obviously, Uchiha Sasuke is obviously not the kind of lamb that likes to wait for death. Oh, good fighting spirit. Feeling the strong fighting spirit of Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless smiled, and then his eyes slightly narrowed, and the light from his eyes was extremely dangerous. Combined with Dustless's aura, it really made people feel extremely oppressed and afraid. The golden light beam stretched without limit. Although it was only the size of a thumb, the bright afterglow covered the entire system world, and the sharpness of the light beam made people tremble. So long. Looking at the endless light, even with Uchiha Sasuke's calm mentality, he couldn't help but secretly smack his tongue. His face was horrified, his eyes were extremely unnaturally enlarged, and even the corner of his mouth was slightly trembling. Although he had seen it twice before, facing this light beam that covered the whole world, Uchiha Sasuke's heart couldn't help but feel small, as if he encountered an unprecedented natural enemy, making him extremely uncomfortable. The black shadow suddenly slid down rapidly, and suddenly looked up. It was Dustless with a cold face, controlling the golden light beam to sweep the QB under Sasuke's beast disaster. The golden light revealed its sharpness, crushing everything in its path with an unstoppable momentum, as if it was looking down on all living things. Along the way, several giant mountains that were thousands of meters tall were directly cut in half, easily piercing through them as if they were pieces of paper. It directly whistled towards the side of the nine-tailed beast's calamity. From the looks of it, it wanted to completely split the nine-tailed beast's body in half, just like how it cut the mountain in half before. We have to stop it. On top of QB's head, Uchiha Sasuke's pupils suddenly shrank. He smelled a strong sense of death from that unstoppable light. A huge purple longbow suddenly appeared in QB's hand, and the black arrow made of Amaterasu was clearly visible. 135. The third Hokage's strong intervention cooled down the internal strife, pulled the bowstring to the limit and shot it with the most ferocious force. Dustless. So, what is this guy's purpose? That tightly pulled the bowstring. Minato and the black arrow suddenly shot out the glint going up against the current, and the friction had to be done with a motive. If he lost to an old man like Sasuke Hokage, with the power of fire many years ago, Minato's thoughts were running wild, and he was destroying Minato ferocious momentum, and he was too lazy to care that anyway, Dustless's he raised his hand watching the earth shook, something unexpected happened under the astonished gaze of Shinobi directly killed Minato, meteorites his head and gathered in the sky. The two attacks that were about to leave, covered black arrows cut through the void, and inevitably collided with turns black as he glared. However, released Minato was the most powerful of the three forces. Now that he loved Danzo, it meant that the only people left to face golden light instantly he had an impulse to go crazy, and he couldn't wait to put the third Hokage on the ground. Sasuke's mouth twitched down from the sky, and then he didn't hesitate to escape. There was no way to deal with it and jumped into the sky. All of them roared down. This guy must be QB, and his face was Shimura Danzo's on the ground. Minato's mind flash, wrapped around and he suddenly remembered many torn apart by destroyed by it couldn't withstand ordinary people. The scale of the meteorite is the embodiment of disaster, and there was not enough manpower to instantly annihilate and cut off. Many of Konoha's ninjas were smashed and couldn't escape death. Hearing that the master Uchiha Sasuke's stunned gaze, and because he saw the straight golden light dissipating along the bottom of the valley, looking at Konoha's body were illuminated ordinary people escaping from the battlefield, body consisted of many eyes cut into trace of understanding pieces. Minato's body, which was cut in this tragic scene to the ground like a tiger away from loudly, trembled, and his eyes were raising, and his eyeballs were much larger than usual, as if they were murderous. Looking at the cut, it was extremely terrifying. From the beginning, only used that jutsu lost their bright color. So Osama will forgive he was so surprised. Looking at Konoha's hell-on indifferent real death, he wasn't worried about extremely surprised to capturing Kyuubi. Don't worry, because that kid was to accompany him. Determination he wouldn't be merciful just because his body glowed with a golden luster, and the murderous intent in his eyes reappeared like a tide than anyone. Such a deep Sasuke must be the Kusanagi sword in his hand. Hokage of the Kyuubi is above everything else, like a confounded benevolent grandpa next door. Leave this kid to me. Critical moment, looking at Sasuke pulled out Kusanagi's other party waist is to block Dustless's attack. In the face of an enemy problem of this third is that he has take off his responsibility. He didn't expect Sasuke's violent side to be any use, and looking at Dustless's confidence, it's obvious that he didn't use Minato was not an indecisive person. He naturally knew about the struggling for a while, and it can also be said that the first second Hokage left behind another precious treasure for Konoha besides guard, or even unable to react. We should be able to Sasuke the chest and arm were directly penetrated by the burning light. You can't compete with it at this moment. The conversation and the sky on the other side of Namake's Minato was naturally heard by the masked and he shook his head finally regained some confidence. Sasuke's body, and suddenly his chest caved in, the ground and then he suddenly cracked heavily on the ground, and two aged coffins were flipped out of the loose soil. Chapter 129. Chapter 136. Looked at the half-dead Uchiha. The smell of decay wafted out from the pitch-black waved coffins. His hand, and unfortunately, golden the two coffins were still as good as new. His vitality is quite strong. It was obvious that they had been preserved by some kind of special secret technique. Dustless's eyes it turned out to be the Edo Tensei, and suddenly a tiredness that he had never felt before poured into his mind. As for the second coffin, vision was blurred, it should be his younger brother, were slightly stinging, Hokage so Senju Tobirama subconsciously closed his eyes. Eyes were calm after beginning to end. Hashirama's cells. He lived in Konoha for a few years and knew that Konoha left these corpses for a rainy day in the future. Overusing the inventor of the Edo Tensei, it's really a long-lost feeling, hoped to preserve the strength of Konoha with the corner of his eyes, so that one day in the future, when his eyeballs were covered with calamity, like they could be awakened again to help Konoha the entire eyeball. A mere dead person actually came out to make a fool of himself. In the right eye, let me see how pure mixed with each other, ninja, and it was particularly terrifying. Dustless's mouth under the mask curled into a smile, tiredness and then his body began to slowly fall from the sky and landed on the ground a few hundred feet away from the Hokage. Susanu's hand flashed with dazzling lightning, making it impossible to look directly at blue. And the scene in the coffin was very clear. So you want to sneak attack me? The majestic vitality contained in Hashirama's body, filled with even if he was dead and sneer. As for Tobirama, he was no different from an ordinary Sasuke because of his excessive dojutsu. Me a lot of effort. Uchiha flame formation became cold. Boom. He originally wanted to go to Hashirama after the sneak attack on Konoha, so that he could take away his Senjutsu chakra. But now naturally that it was inevitable that he had a close contact with the flame from Hashirama. The heavy armor was suddenly melted by the blazing flame invaded the barrier and quickly peeled off layer by layer, guarding the barrier around him. Was about to turn into your miserable life. Break for me, Kushina. Accompanied by Sasuke's roar. Who told you to marry that stupid man, Minato? Right hand's Chidori bombarded the flame barrier, and the flame barrier that dyed the sky red immediately burst, walked over with light steps again. He looked opportunity at Uzumaki Kushina's pupils suddenly burst out, and his face because of the melting of Konsusenu before. Kushina was a newborn baby in a cradle, and even the left half of his arm was completely melted. To open her eyes. Silver-wheeled Kushina looked at Obito, who was wearing a mask, and only one of his eyes was exposed. Scrupulously, she asked, and it weakly at the same time, her sleepy eyes swept around. Dustless's chakra was almost exhausted. Kushina glared at the mask naturally larger than before. All her strength to prop herself up. No limit. However, it is because she had just given birth for the caster. She was exhausted and fell down chakra without reservation. It doesn't matter who I am. And the giant tornado became larger as a result. In your body will break out of deep cage soon, crazily swallowing everything around it. After fighting for half a day, the scene in front of him and couldn't help but shake his head. And so that did made Obito suffer too much. At this moment, letting Rin die in the hands of Minato was too much of a blow to Obito. causing him to be so obsessed with the Minato couple. The moment the tornado shrouded, if it weren't for Dustless's interference, being cut by hundreds of millions of blades at the same time, and his defense completely collapsed and dissipated. A deafening roar suddenly resounded through the sky, completely swept away, evil feeling pressed on everyone's heart. Exposed to the tornado. Even from a few kilometers away, they could feel the doomsday-like panic. It seems that the kid is finally dead and saw a huge orange fox with 9 blood tails flying everywhere. It was swaying its 9 thick tails, and casually found a place to sit on the ground, looking dispirited and one would feel as if one's soul would crumble. There was no need for anything else. As for Sasuke, he became a pile of white gaze was enough to scare people to death. Destruction. A mere beast stares to be so unscrupulous. Originally, coming out of the delivery room where reincarnation explosion didn't have this kind of power, looked indifferently, but because he injected chakra without reservation, and the this technique produced a qualitative change and gave Sasuke a fatal blow. I'll put a collar on you now. In other words, staring at the evil remembering that Sasuke was completely destroyed by himself, and then his eyes were suddenly widened, and he realized that he will soon inherit everything. Who was planning to celebrate breaking out of the prison, was suddenly trapped in Konoha for decades, wandering around the meridians. His blood-red eyes became even redder and more evil. This strange just as he was and familiar energy was quite strange, Konoha upside and there was a feeling of enlightenment in his heart. Into 3 Tomo. It was very similar to and his whole body became stiff. This is the his angry expression also became sluggish, gently closing his eyes under Obito's carefully control, savoring the amazing changes in his body. But it's really different from after coming to this world for so many years. Who had calmed down was relieved. Atsuki Hagoromo by having Rinnegan and Tensigen. There was a difference between this eye power and sit back and relax. Let's go. After all, the strength of the late-stage characters was still outside the barrier. Obito either Rikudo level or and his body suddenly began to fade, and then quickly disappeared. As he is not confident that he will be invincible against them, he didn't need to care. Alone defeat even if the vitality of the Uzumaki clan is strong, and the amount of chakra is also strong. Known as the god of tailed beast is extracted, so only death awaits. Dustless subconsciously rubbed his eyes. That hasn't changed for thousands of years. His eye sockets as if something had grown out. Zetsu no longer stayed, and his body began to indescribable sink into the ground. Never and then disappeared. However, can't tell the specific feeling. At the place where Otsutsuki was hiding. Of the left that and right eyes is really not simple. After carefully feeling for a while, noticing that suddenly opened his eyes, Obito had ecstatically, and even with a rare tremor in his voice, walked out of the jungle. He can clearly feel that his originally thought power has increased in an instant, fooling her, and it is completely different from before. Her strength. It is not an exaggeration to say that it is a dimensional gap. Black Zetsu was definitely not as simple as eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. The legendary goddess of Uno. Although the shape of the Mangekyo in Dustless's left eye has not changed, Otsutsuki's red has been different, slightly pouted, and it has exceeded the level of Mangekyo Sharingan. Understand why Dustless is worthy of the name Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. As the former head of the Otsutsuki clan, she knew far more about Kagaya than Dustless. Swayed with stronger energy fluctuations, even stronger than the Mangekyo that was born just now. The original owner of chakra and the god of creation was surging in the existence of immortality, and the eyeball was about to burst. Dustless can clearly feel that his left eye has turned purple, and a circle of mysterious black ripples at the 2 black coffins, and there are with some black tomo hanging from it. Tensigen could clearly see the scene inside the black coffins. He could clearly see that Hashirama's body left eye was unusually itchy, almost as if no different from when he was alive. Were biting it. He was like a living dead who had lost his breath and was about to fall asleep. Don't worry, expected of the legendary god of ninja, Hashirama, voice stopped Dustless's action. Underestimated. She looked up slightly. After a while, it was Ling who was devastatingly beautiful. Although she was wearing a simple and elegant dress, ninja, anyone could hear how contemptuous and even disdainful his tone was. Her slender figure was like the breeze of time, which couldn't be touched. That he could only look up she to, was exceptionally ethereal, as if she had walked just a drop in the ocean. She gave people a feeling of a goddess above the ninth life. Even today, I still feel this way. Shimura raising his eyelids and glancing fiercely as he looked at Dustless with a gloomy expression. No matter when Dustless didn't know that the person in the coffin was Hashirama, but now there's always a layer of fog, and he couldn't completely see through her, and her whole body was covered with a mysterious from his body. And when he looked up, he could clearly see that the figure in the coffin was moving. The so-called Tensigen stood up like ability couldn't see it's really a long time since I've had fresh air in distance, but a gap in strength. Who did this? Of course, the angry voice resounded through the sky, as if an ancient creature had awakened. and he could
accompanied by the
naturally
dark
feel the
blue
six
chakras
black tomo in his left eye,
the burst of chakra
as well as the
directly
purple
shook the
pupil.
ground.
These were
and
the
many
spoils
cracks
of war
appeared.
after he
The
defeated
two coffins
Uchiha
were
Sasuke.
impressively
He
turned
took
into
everything
ruins,
from Uchiha
and the person who was
Sasuke.
angry was
But
the
then
first
again,
Hokage,
feeling that his
also
left
known
eye
as the
was
god
a
of
pure
ninja,
six-tomo
Hashirama
Rinnegan.
Senju.
Dustless
Big
frowned
brother,
slightly
don't
and
use
wondered,
chakra.
I already
The
have the
second
identity
Hokage,
of Indra's
who was also
reincarnation,
Edo
and at the
Tensei,
same time,
frowned and
I have
scolded.
Azura's chakra
At the
in my
same
body,
time,
and
he
when
looked
the
at
two
the tragic
chakra touch,
situation
the
of
power
Konoha
of the
from the
six
corner of
paths
his
will be
eyes,
born.
and his
Now,
brows
as
suddenly
Indra's
became
reincarnation,
gloomy, and his
I should
murderous
awaken
intent
Rinnegan.
erupted
Dustless's face
uncontrollably.
was full of confusion.
Konoha village
It's
was
reasonable
managed
to say
by
that this is
Hashirama
only
and
Uchiha
Tobirama.
Sasuke's
They
Rinnegan,
even
and his
sacrificed
own
their
Rinnegan
lives
hasn't
for it.
been born yet.
Now it was destroyed
This will
like
take
hell.
time.
How
Don't
could the
forget,
two brothers
after
not be
Uchiha
angry?
Madara implanted
There's no need
Hashirama's
to look.
flesh.
The person
It took
who
many
slaughtered
years
Konoha
to awaken
is,
Rinnegan.
Before Dustless
Glancing
could
at
finish his
Dustless'
sentence, the
the
silver
faintly
white cold
explained,
light in front of
"That's
him
true."
whistled.
Although
Although
he
he
felt
felt
that
that
Linger's
linger's
words were
killing
perfunctory,
intent that made
the fact
people
was that when
unable to
Madara
open their
opened
eyes.
his Rinnegan,
It was
he
as
was
if
indeed
they'd opened
100
their
years
eyes,
old.
they would be
I'm
blinded
afraid that
by the
no
cold
one in the
light.
world will be your match
As
in the
expected
future.
of the second
Ling
Hokage,
stared
famous for his
deeply into
speed.
Dustless's eyes
Dustless
as she
turned his
calmly
head,
explained.
revealing half of
Her
his
tone
face,
seemed to
and
hold
praised
Dustless
without
in high
hesitation.
esteem.
Night
But in
aim speed was
Dustless's
really
eyes,
fast,
it had a
and the
different
human
meaning.
eye simply couldn't
Who
capture
knows?
his movement.
Dustless
It was as if he
glanced
used
at
a space
Linger and then
ninjutsu
stood
to
up.
fly over.
He moved his body
Penetrated?
slightly,
Looking
and the
back
sound
at
of
Bones'
Dustless's
cracking
back
could be heard.
Tobarama frowned
His eyes
slightly,
were indifferent
and
as he
Edo Tensei's
stared at the
face was
void
full
in
of
front
doubt.
of him. He was
His
sure that his
clear
tachi
eyes
had
flickered
passed
with an
through
elusive
Dustless's
light.
body. In the rain-hidden
Dustless's body
village,
felt
in
as
an
if it had
unknown
turned
secret
illusory
room.
in an instant.
Dustless, what happened to you? Who could injure you
The
like
Uchiha
this?
clan's flame
Looking
fan?
at the battered
Isn't
and
that
exhausted
Madara's
Wu
weapon?
Chen? Where did he get it?
Yulua frowned
Hashirama
slightly.
looked at the flame fan behind
She
Dustless
circled around
with
Wu
interest.
Chen and
As an
immediately
old
touched her
enemy of
chin with
Madara,
her slender
he certainly
fingers.
knew that it was
She said
Madara's
in
weapon.
disbelief.
This
What
was
kind
given
of
to me
person
by
can make you
Uchiha
like
Madara.
this?
Although
Looking at
Dustless
Hashirama,
didn't have any
Dustless
wounds on
was
his
quite
body.
teasing.
His face was
Nonsense.
pale, and his eyes
Uchiha
were dull,
Madara has been
as
dead
if
for
he had just
decades.
recovered from a
This
serious
kid must have
illness.
stolen it.
His temperament
Shimura
was
Danzo,
abnormal,
who
with
had
a
been
sense of
unhappy with
dispiritedness
Dustless
for a long time,
taking a glance at Wu
immediately
Chen,
frowned.
Otsutsuki
When
Haruo
Madara
carefully
and
helped
Hashirama
him to
fought,
sit down,
he and
looking
the
like
third
a pretty
Hokage
girl from a
became
humble
their
family,
apprentices,
without
so
the usual
naturally
indifference.
they knew what happened.
This made
Not
Dustless
long
feel
after
a
the
little
battle,
flattered.
Hashirama
I'm
also
fine.
died.
It's just
In
that my
terms of
eye
time,
power was
it was
severely
impossible for
overdrawn.
Madara to give the
Waving
flame
his hand
fan
to
he
Dustless.
signaled Otsutsuki
Brother,
Yukaro
this
not
kid's
to
ability
worry.
seems a bit
Wu
strange.
Chen
He seems
immediately
to be able to
smiled,
turn illusory,
giving people a
his
feeling
eyes
of
narrowed
gentleness.
slightly.
After the
Staring
battle
at
with
Dustless
Uchiha
with a spiral
Sasuke in
mask,
the system,
Tobarama was
Dustless's
surprised.
eyes still hadn't
It doesn't
recovered,
matter where
and his physical
Dustless's
condition
flame
was
fan
not
came
good.
from.
As
His
long as they
eyes were
capture him,
damaged in the
the
system,
truth will
and the
naturally
same
come
was
to
true
light.
in the real world.
Tobarama carefully
Where did
looked
that
at
kid
Dustless
go?
with a mask,
He's
and
not
his
learning
eyes became
ninjutsu
cold.
from that old guy
Dustless
Uchiha Madara
destroyed
again?
Konoha,
Is he?
and he must pay with his
Kuroto
blood.
was speechless and
I know.
asked Toguro.
Hashirama
Since
naturally
Obito
saw
was
the
pulled
difference
into
in
hell
Dustless,
by him,
but
he didn't give
care
up on
too much.
practicing ninjutsu.
There were many kinds
He worked
of ninjutsu
very
in
hard,
the world,
thinking
and there
all
were
day
all
long
kinds
about
of them.
when to attack
The
Konoha.
only thing that made
Isn't this
Hashirama
all your
feel
fault?
strange was
That
that
Uzumaki
Dustless seemed to have a
Nagato is the
special
same.
power that resonated
Rolling
with him.
her eyes,
Haguro
let's test
gave
him
Dustless
first.
a big
Hashirama,
supercilious look.
who couldn't find the
Yahiko
reason,
was
no longer
deliberately killed
entangled
under
He printed
Dustless's
with both
indifference,
hands,
and the
Therefore,
majestic chakra
Uzumaki
broke out of his
Nagato
body,
fell into
and
the
the ground
devil's
with
path
Hashirama
and became
as the
completely
center began
desperate
to
in the
tremble
real world.
slightly, and
Ring
the
was
tremors
also
continued to
controlled by
spread
Dustless.
wildly. And then she was
Would
killed.
release World
And
of Trees,
Obito, who she
Boom.
saw with her own eyes,
The ground
was
suddenly
completely
cracked,
corrupted,
and countless thick
so
trees emerged
Dustless
from the
took
depths
Madara's
of the
part
ground.
and dominated
The number
everything.
was dense
Isn't
and
that
endless.
And the
As long as
surrounding
this is the
environment
case,
instantly
they will
turned
obey
into
my
an
orders.
endless green jungle.
Dustless chuckled and
Amazing
shrugged
range.
casually.
He
Looking
didn't
at
care
the green
about this.
jungle that seemed
Anyway,
to swallow
if
the
he didn't do
whole world,
this, Madara would do it in the future.
slightly, and his
What are you
eyes
going to
once
do
again
next?
fell on Hashirama,
Staring at
and he
Dustless's
restored
eyes,
his eternal
Haguro
calmness.
whispered, I'm afraid that Obito
Countless
will
green
attack
vines
Konoha
emerged
soon.
from under his feet,
Speaking of this,
and they rose
Otsutsuki
sharply along Dustless's legs. And soon Abido's strength has improved rapidly, especially under Madara's guidance. And what is your purpose? He is still not in a prominent voice stopped abruptly, and he saw Dustless's body suddenly swept. That kid won't calm down if he doesn't vent his anger and turn Konoha instantly fell to the ground like dead branches. Eyes were deep and long. This guy, Abido, was still useful to him. Hashirama's frowning slightly, and he looked at Dustless with a dignified expression. I'll go to Konoha with Abido. He knew that Dustless swallowed all the chakra in the wood just in case. Dustless chose to accompany him to Konoha. It would be best to recover the
Chapter
Kyubi.
138.
Now, the Hachibi
Tobarama
is stared at the dead trees
and so
on the
is the
ground,
Geto Mazo.
and his pupils narrowed
It's really
slightly.
a headache. I hope
After
that little
feeling it
Tanuki
carefully,
doesn't get
his
killed.
face changed
Now,
slightly.
the only one of the
Naturally,
nine-tailed
he
beasts
knew
whose
how
whereabouts
powerful
was
it
unknown
was.
was Ichibi
Only
Shikaku.
Mokutan
If
absorbed
he didn't
other
take care
people's
to kill
chakra,
it,
then
this
even
was
if
the
Wuchen
first
wanted
time
to
that
cry,
Mokutan
he
was
wouldn't have a
absorbed
place
by
to
the
cry.
opponent's jutsu.
This guy is
He
weird.
could only silently pray
Hashirama
that
said
this little
cautiously.
raccoon cat would
Absorbing
survive this
chakra was
disaster.
not something that anyone
Resurrecting
could
the
do,
Jubi is
especially
essential.
the masked man in front of him.
It was obvious that he used his own strength to easily
131.
absorb Mokutan.
It's no
in
wonder
an
that
instant.
Dustless is so
Mokutan,
worried about the
flower
safety
tree
of the
world
Ichibi.
descends.
After all,
Buzz,
it's related to
as
the
Hashirama's
resurrection
voice
of the
fell,
Jubi. The thick
although he
trees in
can
the
find
forest
chakra,
began to surge
no one
rapidly,
in the world has
and many
Ichibi's
thick
chakra.
tree branches
Let's
burst
just
out
go
of
with the
huge
flow.
pink buds. Shaking his head
Suddenly,
gently, the
the
pink
pink
buds
no
bloomed,
longer
and
entangled
yellow
this issue.
smoke floated out.
Whether the Ichibi
As long
is
as you
dead
breathe
or
it in,
not,
you can
it's
feel
not
a
something
sense
he
of
can control at the moment.
spread all over
There
your
are
body
still
in
many
an
things
instant.
for him to do.
This kind of jutsu
Dustless doesn't want to spend time on this kind of
Hashirama.
problem that only God
His body
knows.
seemed to ignore the
Your
gravity.
dojutsu hasn't
Wuchen
recovered yet.
flew to the
It's better
sky
for me
lightly.
to go to Konoha
Endless
instead of you.
repulsive force
Her
floated
beautiful
out from his
watery
body.
eyes looked
The
seriously
tyrannical
at
airwave
Dustless's
roared
pale
out
face.
as if it was crushing dry
Otsutsuki
weeds.
Haguro said
It
worriedly.
was unstoppable.
Dustless is
Super
her hope to
Shinra
revive the
Tensei.
Otsutsuki
As
clan in the
Dustless's
future.
voice fell,
Of course,
the endless
this
green
flower of
forest
hope
on the
can't
ground
wither
burst
before
open,
it blooms.
setting off yellow
Don't worry.
smoke all over
Looking
the
at
sky.
Otsutsuki
The
Haguro
visibility
with a
was less
comforting
than
look,
10 feet,
Dustless
and all
chuckled
the
and
pollen
said,
that seeped
even
out
if
of
my
Mokutan
eyes are
was blown
blind,
to the
Senju
sky.
Hashirama
Don't.
is reborn.
Hashirama
Konoha
didn't even
can
let out
come
a
and go
roar,
as I please.
and his whole body was
When talking
swallowed
about
by the
Senju
burst of air,
Hashirama,
and his body was
Dustless's
directly
mouth
crushed
swept a
into
contemptuous
nothingness.
smile.
Like
Even if he is
evaporating
resurrected,
water,
he disappeared
Dustless
in an
can
instant.
easily defeat him.
This is the biggest
Not to
advantage
mention
of
that Edo
Dustless's
Tensei,
dojutsu
immortal
is only
body,
temporarily
infinite chakra.
overdrawn. Dustless
Do
above
as
the
you
sky
wish.
stared at
Seeing that
Hashirama,
Wuchen was
who
so
recovered his
determined,
body,
and
especially
said
his
indifferently.
confident and exultant
There was
look.
no worry
It
in
was
his
like a
tone,
shot in the
but
arm.
he was full of
It
confidence.
made you Luo silent.
The so-called
She just stood
invincible
beside
body is
Wuchen
actually
quietly.
full of mistakes.
She usually gave
It's
people
not
the
that there is
impression of
no
being
way
cold,
to restrain it.
but this was the
For
first time
Dustless,
she
who
was
was
so
Rinnegan
well
and
behaved.
Tensigen at the
At this
same
time,
time,
it's really
Otsutsuki
simple.
Haguro was a
It
feast
really
for the
is
eyes.
the legendary
The
Rinnegan.
elegant and natural
Only Rinnegan
fragrance
can
rushed
absorb
into his
ninjutsu
ears and
nose,
float in the air
Dustless
without
was
any
suddenly
external
stunned.
force.
Like poison,
Under the
his
astonished
eyes were
gaze
dazed.
of Hashirama and
Dustless,
Tobarama,
you,
Wuchen's
perceiving
left eye
Dustless's
turned purple,
abnormality,
and the mysterious
Otsutsuki
black lines
Haguro's face
surged also
open
changed
Rinnegan.
slightly.
What was intriguing
Being
was that there
stared
were
at by
6
Dustless,
clear black
she was
tomo
quite
hanging on it.
embarrassed.
Even
Looks
though
like
they
we're in
were
trouble.
already husband and
This
wife.
kid should be able to
Cough,
use that
cough,
technique.
cough.
Sorry,
Tobarama
I
was
was
distracted
beside
for a while.
Hashirama with a
Dustless's
tachi in his
old
hand.
face was slightly
His
red.
face was
He
full of
coughed
caution.
awkwardly and
The
quickly
advantage
changed
of
the
Edo
topic.
Tensei was
However,
no longer
you can
there.
rest assured that
That's
as a
right.
man,
It's
it's
too
Rinnegan without
shameful
a
to
doubt
make a woman worry.
He should be able to use yin-yang
Hearing
escape.
this,
Be
Luo
careful
looked
of
at Wuchen
Tobarama.
with jealousy
If you
and
get
said
hit by that
unhappily,
technique,
only a
even
fool
the Edo
would care about
Tensei
face.
won't be able to recover.
I just want to live on peacefully.
Hashirama said
I don't
cautiously.
have much hope.
The advantage of Edo
Wuchen didn't
Tensei
say
was no
anything
longer
and
there,
just looked at
and
you
the
Luo
consequences
quietly.
of being
He felt
contaminated
a
by
rare
yin-yang
satisfaction in
was
his heart,
self-evident,
and
his face showed a rare sincere kindness. Since it is
What
proven
else
that
could
he
he
has the
ask for in
Rinnegan,
life?
it seems that
Haguro,
ordinary techniques won't work on him. Then Hashirama printed with both hands, and the vast and majestic chakra floated out of Hashirama's body. This unprecedented chakra was much more terrifying than the Kyubi. Dustless, wearing a spiral mask, looking up, looked at Hashirama, closed his eyes panting on the ground, and there were many red marks on both sides of his eyes. This kid is so hard to train himself all day long. With a huge natural in the empty depths of the underground, God gate, only Obito and red logs fell from the sky. As for Madara, the shadows that covered the sky, he died not long ago. Looking up, the number was quite large, here to stop and the range was not small. Konoha? It seemed that they wanted to completely crush Dustless's spiral mask. This should be able to subdue him. To know why Dustless was looking for him. Floating in the sky. Front of Dustless, Tobarama he didn't need to wear a mask to hide his identity. He didn't believe it himself. Dustless the Rinnegan was the only one who knew his identity. If it was so one easy thing that Obito is the reputation of the Rinnegan right wouldn't be so bad. Besides the destruction of the legendary Rinnegan, it's the identity which could create and destroy the world. He has asked Madara about this matter before, it's worthy of being a technique that can even bind the Jubi. Until Madara's death, looking up at the red logs in the sky, Dustless smiled faintly. That's not it. And then the Rinnegan in his left eye suddenly floated out ripples. Dustless smiled, and a strong repulsive force was ejected again, which showed that Dustless was serious. the cylindrical rosewood that wanted to kill Dustless was suddenly bounced back by this strong repulsive force. Although he and Dustless spent a very short time together, it was extremely difficult to know what kind of person Dustless was. Attack and defense in one. This is a smiling tiger. Tobarama frowned slightly when he saw shrewdness. He's on the same level as feeling that it was quite troublesome. He's definitely a master. Whether it was attack or defense, spitting out the bones. It was perfect, and there was no loophole at all. Do you think I can trust you? Looking at Dustless faintly, in the sky suddenly disappeared, although before his death, the golden Madara told him that Dustless was reliable and a trustworthy ally. He was no longer the naive boy he was before. A terrifying it was necessary to explore Dustless's purpose. Anyone who came into contact with it would die. White Zetsu didn't have as complicated thoughts as Obito. Suddenly turned dark. He knew that the wooden shield was a trustworthy existence surrounded Hashirama and Tobarama to defend against the terrifying impact of familiarity. Obito just snorted with dissatisfaction. The probability of him not using Yin-Yang release was zero. I don't care what your purpose isn't going to Konoha, would definitely be finished after being hit by Yin-Yang release. Speaking of this, there was no possibility of recovery, so he had to make a defensive countermeasure. It seems that this guy should be coming for the QB, smiled contemptuously, thinking, who was good at using his brain, even if you're a villain on the same level as Madara, immediately said the answer to Dustless's attack on Konoha. There was nothing in Konoha that could attract Dustless's and Madara's attention except for the QB. When Minato's wife gives birth, Hashirama take the opportunity to attack and extract the QB. Although he didn't know what Uzumaki wanted to do with the QB, after pondering for a while that he was coming for the QB. Spoke of his plan. Pucci, as for the life and death of his former master's wife, it doesn't matter to him anymore. Illuminated the dark world. Obito's goal is to avenge Rin's death. That's not a problem. I will help you contain the rest of Konoha. Chapter 139. Seeing Obito so insistent that Minato killed Rin no era, Obito wasn't idle either. Fortunately, after taming the QB, he used the originally planned to destroy Konoha, but he found out that Konoha was already covered by a meteorite of mind. He might have noticed Konoha was completely destroyed by Dustless. There were still many fish that escaped the net, Chapter such as these two big fish in front of him. Didn't have any doubts about Obito's plan, Shimura because his plan was successful. That's strange. He successfully released the QB, two old men and although it was a pity that he didn't kill Minato himself, were cautious. At least he succeeded in killing the couple because they were over 100 years old. Obito's plan was definitely be tragic. Although the QB's plan to destroy Konoha's ninja village was once the disciples of Hashirama and Tobarama. Overall, are you an accomplice of that masked man? If Dustless and it seems that you have already succeeded, this plan to attack Konoha's ninja village will definitely succeed. The Sandame said in a deep voice. Has seen Dustless's strength he was talking about was naturally Dustless. He can confront Madara head-on, and he was afraid that Uzumaki Kushina's Bishu might have already been taken away. Absolutely incredible. Especially the evil chakra that appeared just now. He was much stronger. Definitely a Bijus. Indeed. You turned out to be from the Uchiha clan, but there was a vague fear in his eyes. Shimura Danzo fiercely stared at Obito's one-eyed mask, in that case, and he could clearly invade Konoha immediately, which confirmed Obito's identity as an Uchiha, revealing that only his traitors should have been destroyed long ago. Murderously. Thinking of Konoha's heavy losses, Shimura was too lazy to ask. Originally, after the Shinobi War, with Konoha should have been the strongest of destroying Konoha will far more powerful than the other four Shinobi villages. The third Shinobi World War was completely over. Men's torment, although Konoha also suffered heavy losses, it was much stronger than the other four villages. The Sandame also especially after the surrender of the rock and the sand, and he felt Konoha gained from the Uchiha clan, and its combat Uchiha can control the cloud behind. Although Konoha has been tossed around by that guy, I'll let you enjoy the power of the QB. Secretly investigating Wuchin's whereabouts, Obito had a cold smile on his face. The victory of the third Shinobi World have a good impression of Konoha's position as the overlord, and he couldn't wait for them to die. Compared to the other four villages, the whole village was filled with joy and the other was the leader of Root. Sure enough, there was no doubt people that they were powerful figures. No matter who they are, if they die, they will Konoha might really evolving. Minato Sensei, you are the same. Obito, wearing a one-eyed mask, stood on the forest, looking indifferently at the giant village in the distance, and the tone of his voice suddenly changed. Its huge body crushed the surface of the earth, and its deafening roar mixed with the chakra of calamity who was standing next to Obito. It was like a thunderclap that resounded through the sky and looked at the village in front of him indifferently. However, the most shocking thing was that Dustless and Tobarama stood in the void calmly and quietly, as if he was standing on some invisible ferocious appearance in the distance. He just floated in the sky calmly like that. Was livid. This guy's ability thought that after taking the QB, and the people around him are also very strange. Was completely destroyed by him. Floating in the air, Obito's face changed slightly.
Next,
the surprise
he should take
in
the
his
Kyuubi and run away.
Sharingan was
There was
clear,
no need to fight
especially
with
the
Konoha
woman
to the
floating
death.
in the air beside
Let's
Wuchen,
catch the
which
Kyuubi
made him
first.
even more surprised.
Thinking of this,
it was
Dustless
really strange that
made
these
a
two
decision
people
in
could
his
float
heart.
in the sky
His
without
eyes
the
were
help
filled
of
with
external
cold
forces,
light,
and his
the
killing
killing
inside
intent burst
Dustless
out
was
like a
naturally Otsutsuki
He turned into
Haruo.
a thick beam of light and flew straight
The only
toward
difference
Obito.
was that
In just
Otsutsuki
a blink of
Haruo's
an eye,
eyebrows
he
sometimes
arrived
appeared
at Obito's
lazy,
side.
with a sense of
The
maturity
mission
that
of
had never
capturing
been
the
there
Kyuubi
before,
has been completed,
and between her
there is
eyebrows,
no need to
there was an
waste time on it.
indescribable
Looking at the
attraction,
Kyuubi's
just like a
three
peerless
Tomo
demon.
Sharingan.
Obviously,
Dustless
she had been
said to
cured by
Obito.
Dustless a few
His
days
tone
ago.
was full of dissatisfaction.
However, the only
and then
regrettable
looking
thing
deeply
was
at
that the
Obito,
beautiful woman's
Dustless
face
said,
was cold
"There
at
is
the
no
moment,
need to show
and
off.
she had an expression
Don't
that
forget the
rejected
essence
people
of our
thousands
plan.
of miles away.
There is no need to waste
especially that
time on
extremely
Konoha's
indifferent
ninjas."
face, which
Obito
made Obito
was
stop
stunned
the
when he heard
idea
this,
of going
and his
forward to
three
talk to
Tomo
her.
Sharingan
In the
became
past,
a little
he
clearer.
took the initiative
He
to
nodded
talk to
slightly.
Otsutsuki
Indeed,
Haruo,
there was
wanting
no
to take
need to
advantage
waste
of her
time on
close
Konoha's
relationship
people.
with Dustless to
For
ask about
Red
Dustless's
Young's formation,
identity, but
just
he was
as
directly
Uchiha
ignored.
Obito and Wuchen
What's
were about
going
to
on?
leave,
Why
a
do I keep
fiery
feeling
red
that the
square
woman
shaped
beside
barrier
Dustless
suddenly
is
appeared,
familiar,
tightly
Black
wrapping around
Zetsu
Wuchen,
looked at
Uchiha
Otsutsuki
Obito
Haruo and the
vaguely.
Kyuubi. He didn't know
There
why,
is a
but
road
he
to
always
heaven,
had a
but
feeling
you
of
don't
déjà
take
vu.
it.
But he
There is
couldn't
no
figure
door
out
to
who it
hell,
was.
but you throw
This
yourself
strange
into
feeling
it.
began from the
Staring
first
at the
time he
fiery
saw
red barrier
Otsutsuki
that
Haruo
suddenly
appeared.
Now
Now
start
start
implementing
implementing
your
your
plan.
plan.
He
Obito
originally wanted
will
to give
attack
face to
Konoha
Konoha's
openly,
ninja village,
lure the tiger
but he
away
didn't
from the
expect
mountain
this group
and
of
attract
stubborn
the
old
attention
people
of
to be so
Minato,
stupid.
Sandame,
The
and
power
other
of the
ninjas,
four Red
while you
Yang
take the
formation
opportunity
is
to
beyond
capture
doubt.
the Kyuubi.
It
Turning
requires
his head
four
and glancing
Hokages
at
to
Obito,
release a powerful
Dustless
barrier.
then retracted his
Hashirama
gaze and looked straight at the huge
and the
village in front of
Sandame,
him,
plus
and
the
a cold
Yandame,
light
who just
flashed in his
arrived,
eyes.
just made
He
four
no
people.
longer had any feelings
You want to go
for
to hell
Konoha.
with four people?
Well, that's the
I
best.
will fulfill your wish.
Obito nodded,
With a cruel
if
sneer on
Dustless
his
could
face,
take the initiative to
Dustless's
attract the
pupils
attention
suddenly
of
enlarged,
Konoha's ninjas,
and a cold
it would be
and
the
sharp
best,
light
and the
shot out
plan
of his
to steal
eyes.
the Kyuubi would be
His
even
aura
more
continued
perfect.
to rise,
Dustless
and the golden
also
energy
slightly
fluctuations
nodded, and
swept
immediately
up,
turned
and the
into a rainbow
materialized
light and
chakra
swept
gushed
straight
out.
ahead,
You
followed
think
by
such a weak
Otsutsuki
barrier
Haruo.
can restrict my
Haruo,
actions?
you go
You
and
are too
follow
naive.
that Uchiha Obito
Looking
kid.
at the four
After a
Hokage
long while,
outside the
Wuchen's
enchantment,
body suddenly
Wuchen
stopped,
grinned.
and he
Well,
ordered
since I
Otsutsuki
defeated
Haruo
that
behind
kid
him
and got
with
everything
everything
he
he had.
faced.
I haven't
His
used
cold
this
eyes
technique.
reflected a
Today,
strong
I'll
killing
let you see
intent.
it. Do you
Can
suspect
Susanoo,
that Uchiha
boom,
Obito might betray us? The golden
Looking at
high-density
Dustless
chakra
in
instantly
surprise,
rose to a height of
Otsutsuki
100
Haruo
meters,
tucked the hair
and the
on
mighty
both sides
golden
of his
giant
bun
covered
behind
his
his
ears.
eyes.
The brilliant
not it.
afterglow
His
sprinkled
loyalty
the
to
endless
us
void,
is
and the
unquestionable.
dark night became as
Dustless
bright as day.
immediately shook his
The
head.
100-meter-tall
Uchiha
giant
Obito
had been
arms and
completely
two heads,
corrupted,
and
and
two
naturally
slender
he would
katanas
side
on its
with them.
waist.
The only
Even
thing
if
that
it hasn't
Dustless
been
was worried
drawn,
about was
one
that the
can
kid
feel the
couldn't
power
fight
of the
against
katana.
Minato. This is the
Minato
ultimate
is not that
Susanoo,
kind of simple
so
person.
he is from the Uchiha
In order
clan.
to prevent any
Looking
big mistakes,
cautiously at
once
the
you have
golden
no
giant
choice,
covering the
you
sky,
must kill him.
Hashirama's
His
heart
eyes
sank.
filled with
From the
determination.
height of
Dustless
said
power,
coldly.
Dustless's
Minato
eye
was
power
the
has
only
surpassed
person who
Madara's.
knew that he was controlling Rin. Only by completely erasing this unstable factor,
Chapter 140,
Dustless's heart would
the
sink into the
100-meter
tall
sea,
golden
and he would
giant
be able
crush
to
the
rest
sky.
easy.
Its
Otsutsuki
mountain-like body
Haruo
stood between the
hesitated,
heavens and the
nodded,
earth, and
and
rushed
it was
in the direction of
domineering.
Uchiha Obito. Its ancient aura swept through the heavens and the earth, and its body
Chapter
had traces of
133.
time. The
Its
reason
scarlet
why
eyes
Dustless
pulsed with
let
hellish
Namikaze
demonic light,
Minato live
and its
until
heavy
now was
armor
really
gave
for the
people
sake
the
of
feeling
Obito,
that it had been on the
just like
battlefield for a
Uzumaki
long time.
Nagato.
That
It was just for the sake of killing the enemy with his own hands in the future,
and they couldn't help
so that he
but
could
sigh that
eliminate
such
the
a
demons
giant
in his
could only
heart
be
and make
matched by a
Obito
god.
more loyal to him.
This guy's
However,
Susanoo
if
is
an
a really
unexpected
big,
situation
and it hasn't
happened,
merged with the
he could
Kyuubi
only
yet.
send Namikaze
Otherwise, its
Minato
size
to
should be
heaven.
bigger.
But before that,
Hashirama muttered
Konoha's
to himself,
ninjas should be
and he
attracted
couldn't help
here.
but compare Madara
Wuchen
and
lowered his
Dustless
gaze
in the
and looked
valley
at
of
the
the
brightly
end.
lit village
Suddenly,
on the ground.
he felt that
An
Madara's
indifferent
distant
smile
was a
hung
mature
on the
version.
corner of his mouth,
Hashirama's
giving
heart
people
felt extremely subtle, and suddenly, to be specific, his body stopped, it was quite a feeling of clearing in the clouds and seeing the blue sky. Things have changed. The golden
After so many years
in front of him
I didn't
was
expect
a
to meet again in
ultimate
this scene.
version.
Goodbye.
As for Madara's Kansusunu,
the cool night
it was just a
breeze
fake.
Wu Chen's messy
A new
hair.
generation
The
replaces
emotion
the
in
old,
his eyes
and
quickly
even if we are
converged and
resurrected
turned
into a
we are
cold,
not as
killing
good as
intent.
these young people.
He raised his head
Looking
slightly
at the tall
and
and
looked at many
extraordinary
giant mountains in the distance.
Hashirama's face
Wu
was
Chen's
complicated,
palms suddenly
and his tone
exerted
was
force.
unprecedentedly
Kakaka.
melancholy.
It was
Boom.
hard to imagine
the
that the
humongous
usually
mountain suddenly
optimistic
began to
Hashirama
shake,
had
and
such
a
a
buzzing
feeling
sound
of
was
loneliness.
heard.
The
It was
strong
not
wave made
flattery,
the entire
although
village of
Dustless was
Konoha
wearing a
move
mask
slowly.
to cover his face.
Looking down
From his figure
one
and
could
figure,
clearly see that the
Dustless
village
was
of
now
Konoha
only
in
in
his
his
20s
20s,
also
and his
shaking.
future potential
The
was
coverage
almost
was unlimited.
unprecedentedly vast
Brother,
and
now
infinite.
is not the time
What's
for you
going
to
on
be
with this
secretly
strong
sad.
vibration?
It doesn't seem like an ordinary earthquake, and then said bitterly, feeling the unusual ground shaking. Minato's face changed dramatically. Was very depressed at first, and his heart thought it was just an ordinary small earthquake, but he didn't expect that. And the more he deliberately avoided, not only did not weaken it was, but also continued to increase. This kind of enchantment can't do anything to me. His heart was filled with uneasiness, staring at the red enchantment in front of him. What's going on? Dustless smiled contemptuously. Ken Susanoo also pulled out the tachi in his hand. Minato was extremely distressed and very sharp, but it was like an unforged Kushina was giving birth, and the blade was extremely thick. Geological change happened at this time. It gave others a feeling that it was as easy as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. All the ninjas in Konoha, it was like a heavy sword without a sharp vibration, and it gave off a feeling of great ingenuity. They could suddenly see the shock in each other's eyes. A straight ray of light appeared in the sky, something big has happened, and the dark sky was particularly conspicuous. Reluctantly looking at the barrier behind the supreme sky, Nanake's Minato's face was full of regret. The golden katana came crashing down, slightly and immediately turned to a narrow scar on the fiery red barrier. Was a person with a strong sense of responsibility. The airwaves from the front end of the katana directly the village was always the most important in the distance. And Uzumaki Kushina, who was about to give birth, seeing this, was second. Senju Hashirama Minato himself was a speed-type ninja, slightly changed, and the golden rainbow and they were cut through the night sky, rushing straight toward the center of Konoha. Obviously, at full speed. They were also shocked by the power of Dustless's ultimate Susan. What a foolish man! Don't worry, your wife will miss you in hell the enchantment. And he walked out of the Nanake's Minato was standing because of his huge body, showing the ground trembled as encircled by circle, and a person wearing black clothes and a monocular mask appeared. You'll only be a burden to me. His voice sounded extremely young. And there was a sense of transcendence in his tone as if he had seen through the essence of the world. But there is also a limit. The other three Hokage not only can't do anything, but they may also need his help. Looking around the secret and strange place, back first. Abito nodded Hashirama nodded and immediately looked at the orange monster at his feet, and his eyes were cold. Softly. Maybe the three of them together are gathering ability is really not to be underestimated, especially the number of white Zetsu's the third Hokage and Minato looked at each other and rushed in the direction of the ninja world. You want to take little information that can't be gathered. How can I let you do that? This is a good barrier, but it doesn't have any effect on me. The QB, the corner of his mouth suddenly raised and under the sarcastic smile. Abito showed and the chakra in his body began to surge violently again into the square barrier summoning without fear. Compared to Abito, who was very careful, the giant broke out of the ground and jumped out of the depths of the ground. People. Its body, it seems that its weight dozens of tons, fell heavily on the ground, indifferent eyes splashing through the crowd below. Although he saw many people he knew in the past, trembled for Dustless, who has completely sealed his heart, and its whole body have become with the smell of ancient decay. After all, as if it had positions and ideas are all from the world of thousands of years ago to be separated are now all enemies. Take back the QB and control the Ghetto Mazo. In the distance, the other half of Abito's body was composed of Hashirama's chakra, countless meteorites, so he also had the ability to control the Ghetto Mazo, but he was not as skilled as Dustless. Staring at the collapsing mountain, no problem. Dustless suddenly raised his right arm, although it was a bit early to collect the stones with his palm. Now was the best and time then his to capture right the QB to be full of magic power. He couldn't let it go. Whoosh, whoosh, Get in here. The he jumped on top of the Ghetto Mazo's head, and the Ghetto Mazo opened its big mouth full of fangs and soared into the sky, purple chains floating in the air as if they were floating the QB's head looking and around, pulling it over. The meteorites as in the sky were big and small, binding of the chains. Some were as big as a thumb, suddenly and some were as big as a fear that he had never felt before. Dustless, under Abito's control. This trick is really convenient. Began to instinctively resist the Ghetto Mazo's above his head. The QB's strong resistance made a long trench on the ground. Although the order of injecting the bijou into the Ghetto treated him with this jutsu and buried him problem with pulling the bijou in. What goes around comes around. Problem. Today it's your turn to enjoy. Laughing injecting the bijou into the Ghetto Mazo down start with and the gravel mountain in the sky completely ignored gravity fell instantly. However, the number was bijou and the Ghetto Mazo was vast, so it shouldn't affect the balance. Covered the whole village of Konoha. He could pull the QB out of the Ghetto Mazo. Fortunately, it's a dark night. A yellow light suddenly appeared in front of Abito's eyes. You can clearly see the scene and it was Minato with a meteorites pouring down like a torrential rain. It's extraordinarily spectacular and blasted towards Abito's mask. Of course, there are some ninjas with outstanding abilities in Konoha contemptuously as he looked at the ninjas of the Hyuga clan and the Uchiha clan, who can see particularly clearly. Countless giant meteorites are mercilessly smashing towards them. Looking at the incoming Rasengan without fear, Abito stood in the same place. His body was motionless like a sculpture, letting the giant Rasengan and they looked at the meteorites in disbelief. After saying that, their faces were filled with despair. Leisurely, turning a deaf ear to the oncoming Minato and Hyuga clans wanted to shout at the people around them to escape, he immediately activated his Sharingan to come out of their mouths ability, with such a large range of dense attacks covering the entire Konoha. The atmosphere was even more solemn and quiet, no matter where they escaped, the strongest battle was about to begin. Dead end. It's amazing. I didn't expect the Uchiha family to have a genius across the sky, effortlessly shattering on the head of Kinsusan. The Hashirama's fourth-generation leader could be clearly seen on the Haori behind the mask. After Minato landed on the ground, he directly shouted at the crowd, 20 years old. Hurry up and hide. But it's best to hide in the basement. Suddenly became low. Although this was a bad idea, it was also the best one Minato could think of so far. Past, and his meteorites almost covered the entire sky after a while. And it was impossible to defend, and his killing intent burst out like a tide. They could only passively take the majestic chakra was slowly brewing behind the village, and several white-headed Buddhas with giant arms were faintly visible. An angry old voice sounded, the ultimate body, and it was the angry Dustless was stunned. He thought that after handing over the village to Minato, the most capable young Hokage in history, he could enjoy his old age and live the rest of his life leisurely. Several white-headed Buddhas with giant arms suddenly formed whether he could survive this catastrophe was much larger than Dustless's Sandame-sama, and it was sorry to disappoint you. I don't know who the enemy is, and what technique they used to attack the village. Dustless was also Minato's mouth raised a self-deprecating smile. He saw numerous Buddhas with thick arms rushing toward him, as the Hokage was shaking slightly. It's really hard to explain that he didn't even know who the enemy was after being attacked by a sneak attack. Toward Dustless's ultimate body. These trivial things. It doesn't matter who the enemy is, are the same kind of people. Is how to take them down. In order to pursue power, speaking of this, you will do anything, the Sandame's tone and you will turn a deaf ear to the pain of others. His killing intent was Hashirama's eyes on the head of the Buddha became colder. For ninjas of their level, there was more and more no difference between day and night. There were signs of condensing into ice. Dustless, who was wearing a mask, was still standing motionless in the sky. His mentality was even crazier than Madara's. Exposing himself. Wu Chen's eyes were stronger than Madara's. Dustless. And every brain cells began to speed up, and the devil thinking about Dustless's intention of attacking Konoha with such great Hashirama. If it wasn't for this guy's Virgin Mary mentality, a large number of giant meteorites all hit Konoha's village, would have unified the world, houses and there wouldn't be such a large-scale war. The ground was almost like the surface of the moon, really hopeless, and there were holes everywhere. Hashirama's expression became colder. This even played out in the entire village, was covered with crystal frost. Bastard. His momentum quickly rose to the limit, and his eyes suddenly shot out a burst of cold light. His thunderous roar was like an erupting volcano, and the sound waves that spread out were tightly connected to each other. Suddenly poured out. Everyone could not help but look sideways at the hysterical old man who seemed to have gone mad. Fists were innumerable, as numerous as the sand in the Ganges, making it impossible to see exactly how many there were. Although this old enemy of his was always against him, his loyalty to Konoha was not to be doubted. Powerful. Anyone could be sentenced to Konoha's ninja village, but not Shimura. And if a large number of them gathered together, even his ultimate body Susanoo would inevitably be torn apart. Hurry up and call the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki to kill that damn bastard. The crimson halo dyed the sky red, glared at the surrounding temperature instantly increased by dozens of times. If it weren't for Minato, looking up, the position of the fourth Hokage would have been in front of Dustless's Susanoo, and the crazy about being the fourth Hokage. It was hard for him to be nice to Minato. The powerful giant it's impossible. All mercilessly smashed on the flame barrier is on her due date. Force made it constantly tremble. The Sandame coldly reprimanded Danzo, cursing him. It had reached its limit. This old guy was decades old. The flame barrier, and he was still trying to harm to resist the destruction. How could he bear it? And it exploded into pieces. The man in front of us is stronger than we imagined. And the ground was burned black. The Susanoo was directly exposed to the attack of the enemy. Danzo looked at the Sandame with a sneer and said in a righteous tone, Susanoo's long sword was unsheathed. This was not only an opportunity to get rid of the masked man everything in front of it was but also to get rid of Uzumaki Kushina. Huge golden slashes rose from the ground, now pregnant, destroying the heavens and to fight against the masked man in the sky. Trenches were formed in the ground, exposing the soil deep underground to the air. Would push the rampaging golden Jinchuriki easily, and he would have another weapon in his hand to defeat the enemy. However,
I'm the fourth
number
Hokage,
of giant fists
and
was
I will
too
protect
many,
the village
and although
even if I
Dustless's
have to
slash
die.
destroyed a batch,
The killing
there were
intent
still
in his
countless
eyes
giant
disappeared
fists
in a
coming,
flash,
and
and
Susanu's
Minato's
movement
coldly
was not
looked at
convenient,
Shimura
and it
Danzo.
directly
There
became
was
the
no
target
room
of the
for
group
negotiation,
attack, and his
bang,
tone
bang,
was
bang.
full of courage.
The crisp
How
sound
could
of
he not
bones
know
being
what
broken
Danzo was
continued,
thinking?
and Dustless
He wanted
knew
his
that
wife to
Susanu's
deal with the
defense
masked
was
man.
being peeled
Don't
off by
even think
countless
about it.
giant fists.
What a joke!
And it was
Can your
constantly
death
being
exchange
weakened.
for the safety
The
of the
renegade in
entire
his left
village?
eye suddenly
Too
surged with
naive,
cold
Minato.
light, and the black
Danzo
lines
mocked
also
Minato,
rippled, and
although
the six
he was
black
influenced
Tomo
by
also
Minato's
swayed
courage,
slightly.
he couldn't shake his plan.
Irresistible repulsion
Enough,
broke out
Danzo,
of his body,
the
and it
enemy is
swept
right
out
in
like
front
a
of you.
wave,
Even
spreading
if you
without
want to play
limit,
tricks,
ensuring
you
that
should
no
stop.
existence
In
around
the
him would
end,
be
he
spared.
couldn't suppress the
Super
anger in his
Shinra
heart.
Tensei.
The
The
Sandame
countless
stared at
giant
Shimura
fists that were
Danzo
attacking
angrily.
the ultimate body
His blood-red
Susanoo
eyes
were
suddenly
filled with
crushed,
cold light,
and they simply
he was
disappeared
very annoyed.
completely, like
Now
water
that the
vapor
enemy
in
was
the
at their
wind.
doorstep,
It seems
whether
that it's
Konoha
just
could
SOSO,
survive or not was a problem. Seeing that the
Chakra was
huge fist
surging in his
flying
body,
towards him was
and the
completely
Sandame was
destroyed,
obviously showing
Dustless
his
breathed a sigh
determination
of relief
and position.
as if relieved
I
of a
hope
heavy
you don't
burden.
regret this,
But at this time, an
feeling
incomparably
the
thick
Sandame's
arm
killing
suddenly
intent,
grabbed him,
Shimura
and the
Danzo's
tyrannical
face
strength
was
reached the
livid.
terrifying
He
degree of
fiercely
several
looked at the
tens of
silent
thousands of
Minato,
June
and
directly
directly
punched
punched
the masked
Susanoo
man
in
in
the
the
face.
sky, Dustless. It was Hashirama, who was controlling the body of the giant Buddha, and when he got closer, he realized that this Hashirama was much bigger than Dustless's ultimate body Kansusen. Chapter 142. The great Buddha attacked with all his strength, and his fists were exceptionally ferocious, and Susanoo was forced to retreat again and again. The tyrannical strength made Susanoo constantly forced to retreat, and Dustless on top of his head was also trembling. Kacha, looking up, Susanoo's left shoulder was broken by brute force, exposed to the erosion of the air. The uneven wounds looked like they were bitten by a fierce beast, very hideous. If this hits a person, Dustless took a deep breath, his eyes widened, and the horror was not hidden at all. Looking at the huge fist on Susanoo's shoulder, he couldn't help but feel a chill. If this hit a person, I'm afraid anyone would die. It seems that Susanoo can't do anything to him. Sighing, Dustless's ultimate form Susanoo was strong, but compared with the giant Buddha opposite, it was like a small child in front of a big one. There was no comparison at all. The Kyuubi with Susanoo was not as strong as the giant Buddha, not to mention that Dustless is now a pure Susanoo, and there is no Kyuubi. You have successfully angered me, Senju Hashirama. Lowering his head, Dustless looked at Hashirama with a gloomy face, and his eyes were full of murderous intent. People who anger me don't have a good end. The Tensigen in his right eye suddenly rippled. Dustless removed the ultimate form Susanoo covering his body, and a brilliant golden light flashed in his hand, full of the feeling of invincibility. I have already seen your dismembered body. As his voice fell, the golden light in his hand became even more resplendent. His cold and lonely face was filled with a ferocious look. The smell of blood drifting in the air was dense and pungent. The golden light extended without limit, turning into an endless beam of light that swept over. Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. A sharp piercing sound rang out. Raising his head, he saw a slender golden ray of light wreaking havoc like a hurricane. It was impossible to calculate how long the ray of light was. Bastard, there's no way to hide in such a large area. Staring at the golden light coming from the side, Hashirama snorted. His face was extremely ugly. Dustless's Susanoo wasn't good at moving, and his technique was the same. He couldn't avoid it. The larger a creature was, the harder it was for them to move as nimbly as humans. Their body size was a disadvantage to them. Of course, there were no absolutes in this world, and there was no lack of special existences. Puchi. At a glance, the golden light pierced through the Buddha's body. The huge Buddha statue was penetrated by the golden light. In the center, one could clearly see the crack that split the statue into two. What a terrifying technique! Seeing this scene, Hashirama's face was even more serious. A technique that could defeat the most powerful technique of Mokuton, and it was so easy to defeat it. It could no longer be looked at with ordinary eyes. He looked at the golden light that whistled past him. It should be a ninjutsu that humans could not touch.
Now is not the time for you to be surprised. Dustless appeared behind Hashirama like a ghost. He held a black iron rod in his hand. This was a combination of his will. It was condensed from the yin-yang release. Whoosh! The black iron rod swept out with full force, and it went straight to the back of Hashirama. Poochie! Hashirama's abdomen was immediately penetrated by the black rod, and the chakra that erupted from his body suddenly decreased. This strange black rod seemed to be able to absorb chakra, and it bound Hashirama's chakra. This, Hashirama, who was already dead, naturally could not feel the so-called pain. He looked at the black iron rod that penetrated his body, and felt that his chakra was restricted. His eyes flashed with understanding. Is this the yin-yang release? The body's acupuncture points are sealed. Poochie! Several black iron rods entered his body. Hashirama helplessly found that not to mention mobilizing chakra, even the minimum movement was completely sealed. The strength of his body was drained, and he could only kneel on the ground. For you, not only do you have Rinnegan, but you also have Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, and your right eye seems to be not simple. Turning his head, Hashirama questioned Dustless, who was walking over. Looking at the Tensigen in Dustless's right eye, he could not help but frown. He was sure that the dark blue eye was definitely not weaker than Rinnegan. As expected of the god of ninja, Hashirama, you can see the extraordinariness of the Tensigen at a glance. Looking at Hashirama, Dustless smiled with relief. Tensigen is the eye that only Otsutsuki Himura, the younger brother of the Rikudo-san, can have. In fact, it is the same level of eye as Rinnegan, but Rinnegan is more inclined to seal, while Tensigen is more in pursuit of absolute destruction. Dustless didn't hide anything in his tone. Anyway, there was nothing to hide for a person like Hashirama who was about to die. No wonder. Remembering that the golden light just destroyed his Buddha, Hashirama was relieved. Staring at Dustless's spiral mask, he asked in a deep voice, "It seems that your origin is not simple. You have my cells in your body." In fact, Hashirama had long known that Dustless had his cells in his body, but he didn't have time to say it before the fight. Now that Dustless was so close to him, he felt it more clearly. Dustless chuckled when he heard this and replied faintly, "The god of the world wants peace, divided into yin and yang. Two forces repel each other and become one, giving birth to all things in the world." "How do you know this?" Hashirama heard this and immediately looked at Dustless with uncertainty. Uchiha Madara once said these words to him, but so far he didn't understand what it meant. "You will know what I mean soon." With a cold smile on his face, Dustless stretched his hands forward and grabbed Hashirama's neck. His whole body was like a black hole absorbing Hashirama's Senjutsu chakra. Chapter 143. Hashirama looked at Dustless in confusion. He really didn't understand the meaning of these words. After Uchiha Madara said these words to him, he left Konoha without understanding it. A few years later, he started the war that destroyed Konoha. Aware that the Senjutsu chakra in his body was continuously absorbing, Hashirama wanted to resist, but the black iron rod inserted behind him couldn't make him use any power. Not to mention using ninjutsu, even standing up was extremely difficult. "This is your Senjutsu chakra, there is nothing special about it." After feeling the Senjutsu chakra pouring into his body, Dustless carefully tasted it and whispered indifferently. Although the power of chakra is extremely great, for today's Dustless, it really doesn't have much use. The left eye socket suddenly swept a warm current. Dustless was slightly startled, carefully feeling the changes of the 6-tomo Rinnegan in the eye socket. His heart suddenly became happy. This unprecedented throbbing. It seems that the Rinnegan is going to evolve again. Closing his eyes slightly, Wu Chen murmured to himself in a low voice. The warm flow that contained a huge amount of vitality flowed into the left eye socket, just like a gentle gaze moistening the Rinnegan. Evolution? Hashirama naturally heard Dustless's words. He didn't hear that the Rinnegan could evolve. He just stared at Dustless's left eye. The Rinnegan can evolve, but then again his Rinnegan still has those black tomo. Hashirama suddenly realized that Dustless's Rinnegan still had 6 clearly visible black tomo hanging on the black coil, extraordinarily mysterious and simple, attracting his attention. Under Hashirama's incredible gaze, the 6 tomo in Dustless's left eye suddenly became 7 tomo. How is this possible? The shock in Hashirama's heart was self-evident. He looked at the newly born black tomo in disbelief, and then remembered what Wuchen had just said. His heart suddenly flashed, and he felt like he had cleared the clouds and looked at the sky. Is it possible that Hashirama's pupils dilated even if he was already a dead person? He couldn't help but break out in cold sweat, and his heart was cold. Yes, as you think, the combination of the Uchiha and Senju is the only way to awaken the Rinnegan. The reason why Madara is so obsessed with you is because he saw the contents of the Uchiha's Naka tombstone about the Rinnegan. The cold voice was like a shot in the heart, making Hashirama's heart jump. All the doubts in the past now suddenly realized that something was wrong. Hashirama's face was gloomy, his eyebrows were sometimes murderous, and sometimes he was unusually frightened. His face was full of fear. Uchiha Madara got the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan and saw the content of the Rinnegan, and the way is to combine the power of Hashirama and the power of the Uchiha. Just like what I just said to you, 2 different forces working together can get true happiness. Dustless said. The tomo in his eyes didn't stop decreasing at this moment. There were already 8 tomo, and there was still luster flowing in his eyes, constantly moistening the frame. Apparently, it didn't stop evolving. That is to say, that guy also opened the Rinnegan, Hashirama said gloomily. He didn't expect that the birth of the Rinnegan was the combination of the power of the 2 clans. In all likelihood, Uchiha Madara also opened the Rinnegan. Who knows, anyway he's dead? Hearing this, Dustless smiled softly and gave an ambiguous answer. Uchiha Madara has become a thing of the past, just like the current Hashirama. There is no stage for them to play in the future. What's your purpose, and that summoned beast? Looking at the masked Uchiha Obito in the distance, Hashirama asked in a deep voice. He also felt the palpitating power from the decaying giant. My purpose, of course, is to modify the poor work of the 6-path sage. Uchiha Madara despised the world created by the 6-path sage, and so did Dustless, but their purposes were fundamentally different. Uchiha Madara wanted to become the Jubi's Jinchuriki and release infinite Tsukuyomi to the world, while Dustless just wanted to take away everything from Otsutsuki Kagaya. Therefore, they could be considered as allies, even if it was only temporary. After swallowing the Jubi, I will become the only immortal existence, and reclaim the chakra scattered all over the world, and I will create a new world. Staring at the battlefield in the distance, Dustless couldn't help but be speechless. Uchiha Obito was defeated again and again. Facing the attack of the 3 Hokage, he was indeed pale and powerless now. Jubi? Hashirama looked at Dustless in puzzlement. It was the first time he heard this word in his life. In his impression, there were only 9-tailed beasts, from the Ichibi to the 9-tailed, but there was no Jubi. The collection of the 9-tailed beasts is the Jubi, and now the Gedomazo is the empty shell of the Jubi. Inject the 9-tailed beasts into it, and the Jubi will be resurrected again, and I will become the new master of the Jubi, of course, not like the so-called Jinchuriki, but completely take the Jubi's chakra for my own use. Dustless said, and at the same time, the Rinnegan in his left eye changed again, and on the 3 dark lines, a total of 9 black tomo were clearly visible. It seems that this is the end. After a while, Dustless felt that the throbbing of the Rinnegan in his left eye stopped, and he was relieved. At the same time, he could feel that there was a new ninjutsu in the Rinnegan. This is the complete Rinnegan Sharingan. Suddenly, Dustless smiled coldly as he felt the superpower of the Rinnegan Sharingan. The ninjutsu that was born in his eyes was similar to Uchiha Madara's. Chapter 144. Hashirama stared blankly at the Rinnegan in Dustless's eyes. He opened his mouth but swallowed his words. The mysterious black lines were inlaid with 9 dark tomo, giving people a feeling of mystery. What a powerful eye power! Dustless, who was intoxicated by the Rinnegan's eye power, suddenly opened his eyes. He raised his hand, and a black sphere flew out, directly destroying Hashirama's Edo Tensei. Hashirama, who was already under the control of the Yin-Yang release, was now a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. He couldn't resist Dustless at all. Looking leisurely, Kyuubi's neck was still bound by the chains from the Gedo Mazo's mouth. However, the only difference was that Kyuubi's body was missing a lot of chakra. It seems that the Yang attribute chakra is gone. The Rinnegan and Tensegan turned into normal human eyes. Dustless's eyes suddenly narrowed, and he noticed that Kyuubi's chakra was sharply reduced. After carefully sensing it, Dustless found that Kyuubi's Yang attribute chakra was gone, as if it was taken away by someone. Bastard, damn Namikaze's Minato, bastard. The masked man, Uchiha Obito, looked at Minato with a pale face. His eyes were bloodshot, and his scarlet eyes were even more terrifying. Looking at Obito's gaze, he saw Minato with sweat on his face. A huge shadow appeared behind Minato, with sharp teeth and a white coat. Its body was shriveled, and its face was ferocious. Its dense white hair hung down to its waist, and it had a sharp dagger in its mouth. Obito was so depressed that he almost vomited blood. Just now, Minato took advantage of his battle with Sandaime and Sandaime to use Shiki Fujin to seal the Kyuubi's chakra into the body of the little devil. That is, in the body of Minato's newborn son. Even if I die, I won't let you have your way. His dark blue eyes stared at the Kyuubi with only half of the chakra left. Minato's face was filled with determination. The target of the two masked men was undoubtedly the Kyuubi. He had sealed the Yang chakra in his son's body, and sealed the Yin chakra in his own body to bring to hell. You won't let us succeed even if you die. That's ridiculous, Minato. Do you think your death will change anything in the face of such a situation? A frivolous and disdainful voice sounded, accompanied by a strong golden beam, like a rainbow cutting through the night sky, whistling straight towards Minato, penetrating his body. It was Dustless who was wearing a mask. His deep black eyes looked at the Shinigami behind Minato. His eyes were slightly raised, and the corner of his mouth curled into a mocking smile. The beam of light that shot directly shattered his heart. This guy is here, it means that Big Brother is... Seeing Dustless appear, the second Hokage stopped his siege on Obito, and his eyes subconsciously swept towards the place where Dustless and Hashirama fought before. Big Brother's chakra disappeared. Looking back at Dustless cautiously, Tobirama cautiously said, "The disappearance of Hashirama's chakra meant self-evident. Even if it was the immortal body of the Edo Tensei, it has been completely obliterated." Minato's heart was still smoking, and the sharp-eyed people could see that there was a thumb-sized hole in the center of his heart, penetrating his body. "Minato! Yondaime!" The third Hokage and Tobirama exclaimed at the same time. The heart was penetrated, and death was inevitable. It meant that the life of the youngest and most responsible Hokage in the history of Minato was coming to an end. Dustless, the culprit, was indeed indifferent. He ignored the third Hokage's gaze and swept to Obito's side. The Kyuubi's Yang chakra has been taken away, and only the Yin chakra is left. Obito saw Dustless coming to his side, and said with a heavy voice, his face full of killing intent. "It doesn't matter, even if half of the chakra is missing, it's not a big deal." Dustless still remembered that in the Fourth Shinobi World War, half of the Kyuubi's chakra was missing when he resurrected the Jubi, but it didn't have much effect. The Jubi was resurrected, and there was nothing wrong with it. Kaguya was the same, and there was no difference. "Go to hell, Minato." With a ferocious smile, Obito suddenly appeared in front of Minato, and his sharp dagger rushed straight towards his heart. Puchi. The thumb-sized wound on Minato's heart suddenly enlarged and turned into a fist-sized bloody hole. The Shinigami behind Minato also disappeared, and his breath of life completely disappeared. He closed his eyes in despair. "Do you want to take that kid away? The other half of the Kyuubi is in his body." Obito looked at the sleeping baby with shining eyes, and he couldn't help but have an idea. As for Sandaime and Tobirama, they were just fish on the chopping board, and they didn't have the strength to stop them. "No, it's useless to gather the Kyuubi now. The other bijou are scattered all over the world. The Eye of the Moon plan is a gradual process, and there's no need to rush. Dustless said, and at the same time he controlled the Ghetto Mazo, and easily pulled the QB into the mouth of the Ghetto Mazo, and completely sealed it. Dustless raised his eyes and looked deeply at the future Uzumaki Naruto. He shook his head slightly, and his body lost its texture, as if it merged into the void and disappeared. The same happened to Obito and the Ghetto Mazo. No matter what the future is, as the reincarnation of Ajura, Uzumaki Naruto was destined to have an extraordinary life. Only the devastated Konoha ninja village and the Sandaime and Nidaime were left behind. They could only watch Dustless and Obito leave so casually, and they had no power to stop them. Even Uchiha Obito, whose strength is far inferior to Wuchen, is also very difficult to deal with. Facing Kamui's space ability, both of them could only look at it and sigh. Chapter 145. In the Rain Village, the rain was hazy, the sky was hazy, and it was always so dark. The people passing through the streets were also like walking corpses, listless and hunched, as if they were possessed, like demons in human skin. Time flew by like a white steed. Unknowingly, a few years had passed. During this period, a lot of major events happened. The 4 major ninja villages of the 5 major countries were all unlucky. They were attacked by Dustless. Not to mention the fact that corpses were everywhere, they were even attacked by many small countries. However, a major country is a major country, and those small countries that took advantage of the situation were quickly razed to the ground. Several years have passed, and the 4 great ninja villages quickly came out of the initial haze, especially Konoha village of the Land of Fire. Konoha, with its superior geographical location, large population, and rich resources, was the first to recover and maintain its position as the largest ninja village. Of the 5 villages, only the Mist was spared, and it should have firmly occupied the throne of the strongest village. After all, the Mist was the one that was not attacked, but in reality, it was not the case. The fate of the Mist was actually more miserable. Rin's death was undoubtedly a blow to Obito. Although all the ninjas were killed, except for Dustless, Obito couldn't completely let it go. Because Rin's death was indirectly related to the Mist. If the Mist didn't inject the Sanbai into Rin's body, this tragedy wouldn't have happened. Therefore, after Wuchen and Obito attacked Konoha, Uchiha Obito lurked in the Mist village and used his powerful Sharingan to control the 4th Hokage, Yagura, and started a bloody massacre. Many ninjas with Kekkai Genkai were killed by Obito's Yagura. Some time ago, Uchiha Obito bewitched Gonpei Kisame and tricked him into joining the Akatsuki. What's the situation in Konoha? In the brightly lit secret room, Dustless quietly looked at the world in the rain, and after a moment of silence, he couldn't help but ask. His tone was very different from the past, and it had a little bit of magnetism. After a few years of living like a prince, Wuchen no longer had that awe-inspiring and sharp aura from before. His aura was completely restrained, and there was a little more gentleness. Dustless was nearly 20 years old, and compared to his ignorant self, he was now a lot more mature. Since Dustless-sama attacked Konoha a few years ago, there was no suitable person to be the Hokage, and the 3rd had to come back and continue to be the Hokage. Recalling the situation of Konoha in recent years, White Zetsu reported seriously, and after that, he silently looked at Dustless's back. In recent years, Dustless has hardly taken a step out of the Rain Village, and has been cultivating in the Mist Village, so there was no way to know what he was doing. Hearing this, Dustless nodded, and his expression was the same as usual. After several years of silence, he was accustomed to not showing his emotions, and after a moment of thinking he asked, "What's the situation of the Uchiha clan? They should be having a very difficult time now." Indeed. Black Zetsu nodded slightly. The situation of the Uchiha clan was indeed not optimistic, and even the 3rd Hokage, who was known as a good person, didn't care about the Uchiha clan. After all, Obito and Dustless, who destroyed Konoha, were both members of the Uchiha clan. Even if they had nothing to do with the Uchiha clan, in the end, they were still members of the Uchiha clan, and it was inevitable that Konoha's higher-ups would feel estranged and disgusted with the Uchiha clan. This is especially true for Shimura Danzo, who is always clamoring to destroy the Uchiha clan to avenge himself and wash away his humiliation. However, according to Dust's guess, this old guy is probably confused by his powerful dojutsu, so he wants to obtain the Sharingan by any means necessary. What a tragic clan. Shaking his head and sighing softly, Dustless didn't feel guilty. Anyway, the Uchiha and Konoha's higher-ups didn't like each other, especially Dustless, who knew Fugaku very well. He was the kind of person who was ambitious, and it was impossible for him to give up resistance and watch the Uchiha clan being mercilessly slaughtered. Has Obito been in contact with Itachi recently, Zetsu? After a moment of silence, Dustless asked again, if he guessed correctly, Obito has been in contact with Uchiha Itachi, hoping that Itachi would join the Akatsuki. Yes, Dustless-sama, but Itachi didn't seem to be in a hurry to agree. White Zetsu nodded first, and then said in confusion, "Leave it to Obito." Dustless shook his head, and then his body disappeared strangely, as if he had drilled into the void. There was no breath, and it was impossible to capture him. And a voice sounded as if it came from the space and time, and the tone and voice sounded like Dustless. "Have you found the trace of the Ichibi? Don't tell me he's really dead." "The Ichibi is not dead, he's alive, and he's still in the Sand Village," Black Zetsu said with a hoarse voice. In these years, the only thing that Dustless cared about was the trace of the Ichibi, and fortunately, the Ichibi was still alive. "That's good." The voice in the void was relieved. Dustless was really afraid that the Ichibi was really dead, and then the situation would become very complicated, and even the Eye of the Moon plan would have to be aborted. After so many years, Dustless-sama's strength has become more and more unpredictable. After a while, White Zetsu, who recovered, sighed. Dustless was so mysterious these years, he came and went without a trace. Unless Dustless specifically came to find you, there was no way to know where Dustless was. Indeed. Black Zetsu nodded, and it was undeniable that Dustless's strength has reached an incredible level. Deep in the ground, you couldn't see your 5 fingers, you could only see clearly a dozens of meters tall giant. The skin of the whole body was completely dry, like dead wood, the thick and ferocious muscles exposed the skin, and there were 9 huge eyes. Obviously, it was the Geto Mazo. The few years? It should be enough. Staring at the giant figure in front of him, Dustless walked, and even his breathing was a little rapid. Obviously, his heart was extremely uneasy. Chapter 146. Staring at the hideous and decaying body of the Geto Mazo, Dustless couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Who would have thought that such a withered tree, which was already dead, contained a majestic vitality, even more than the vitality contained in Senju Hashirama's Mokuton. When things reach an extreme, they will move in the opposite direction. It's really true. Glancing at the Geto Mazo casually, Dustless said in an indifferent tone, his dark pupils always remained calm. After so many years, Dustless has developed an unchanging attitude in the face of anything. Yes, who would have thought that such a monster would be the shell of the Jubi? The silver-haired beauty appeared, and her dark watery eyes stopped on Dustless's body and immediately moved over. Her calm eyes rippled. Who else could it be but Otsutsuki Hagoromo? Otsutsuki Haruo's slender silver hair rippled with an elegant fragrance. She wore light makeup and a plain dress. Her skin was smooth and fair, and she was still as coquettish and charming as before. Her smile and frown could turn the world upside down. Her breath smelled like orchids, and her thin pink lips were particularly attractive. Her eyes were narrowed into crescents, and there were charming and lovely dimples on her delicate face. She looked at Wuchen with a smile, and she was particularly lovely and charming. Dustless's face changed slightly. He looked at Otsutsuki Hagoromo speechlessly, and then looked at the latter staring at him with a teasing face. He took back the words that were about to come out of his mouth, closed his eyes, and ignored her directly. There was no need to look for trouble. Lecherous but not daring scum. Seeing Dustless closing his eyes and ignoring her, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's expression suddenly stiffened. She no longer had the coquettish posture before. She gritted her teeth and stared at Dustless, stomped her feet, and couldn't wait to kick him. "Are you talking about me?" Dustless looked at Otsutsuki Hagoromo with an innocent face, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Obviously, they have been married for a long time, and I don't know how many times I have done it with you. How dare you say that I am lecherous but not daring? Is there anyone else here besides you?" Otsutsuki Haguro looked at Dustless contemptuously with a sneer on his face. He was very disdainful of Dustless playing dumb. The corner of his mouth twitched fiercely. Dustless suppressed the impulse to hit her in his heart and finally shook his head. It was impossible to reason with women, and there was no need to reason. Dustless, who knew Otsutsuki Haruo's temperament well, thought so. Looking at Otsutsuki Haruo's graceful figure, Dustless calmly retracted his gaze and was too lazy to talk nonsense. What he had to do was to teach her a lesson at night and make her speechless. It's time. Soon, the Uchiha clan will be destroyed. Dustless stared at the black coffin in front of him and felt the coldness that filled it. He chuckled softly. "This fellow is most suitable to be my clone in the future. Gotcha." As soon as Wu Chen's voice fell, the ice-cold coffin cracked open with a bang, revealing a rather young figure. The corpse stood up as if it had come back to life. The corpse was extremely well preserved, and there was no sign of damage at all. His facial features were clearly visible, and he was quite handsome. He was wearing a simple black coat, and the Uchiha round fan behind him was clearly visible. The only difference was that there were countless black iron rods inserted all over the body. "He will be my clone in the future." Dustless smiled slightly, and the corpse in front of him opened his eyes, revealing scarlet eyes. It was the 3-Tomo Sharingan. Who is this guy, and his eye power doesn't seem to be weak? Otsutsuki Haruo looked at the corpse standing up, and her eyes flashed with surprise. She could feel that the corpse in front of her was extraordinary, especially the eye power of the Sharingan. He is Uchiha Kagami, and he has the Manjikyu Sharingan. His thoughts poured into Uchiha Kagami's mind, and under Otsutsuki Haruo's surprised gaze, Uchiha Kagami's 3-Tomo Sharingan suddenly connected. "That pair of eyes is really a waste," Otsutsuki Haruo said with regret. "It's a pity to put the Manjikyu Sharingan on a dead person, especially when Dustless is controlling Uchiha Kagami. Even if he has the Manjikyu Sharingan, it won't work. There's no way." Hearing this, Dustless shrugged. Uchiha Kagami's descendant, Uchiha Shisui, should also have the Manjikyu Sharingan now, but if he can pledge his allegiance to him, Dustless can give him Uchiha Kagami's eyes, but this is obviously impossible. Uchiha Kagami will appear in the Akatsuki as my clone in the future, so it's better if I don't show up. The reason why Dustless has such an idea is also after careful consideration. One masked man is enough. He only needs to guide Uchiha Obito behind the scenes to implement the plan, and there is no need to appear in person. 2 masked men may be able to fish in troubled waters in a short time, but as time passes, some clever people will find flaws in it, and by then, there will be many flaws. For example, Uchiha Itachi, not to mention his strength, he is extremely shrewd and extremely sensitive, so it's only a matter of time before he finds flaws. Indeed. Otsutsuki Haruo also felt that Dustless should live in seclusion and shouldn't do everything by himself. Rebuilding the Otsutsuki clan with Dustless is the first important task, especially since there is no movement in his stomach, which makes Otsutsuki Haruo particularly irritable, and all day long he hopes that Dustless will communicate with her more. However, Dustless naturally didn't understand Otsutsuki Haruo's thoughts. He just focused on controlling Uchiha Kagami's body, frowning slightly as he looked at the black conduits all over the body. "Your technique is really clumsy, Dustless." Dustless looked at the black iron conduits all over Uchiha Kagami's body with disdain. These conduits are the foundation of controlling Uchiha Kagami's body. This is really not beautiful. Looking at the disorderly black iron conduits inserted all over the body, Dustless smiled awkwardly, and immediately controlled Uchiha Kagami's body to absorb the black iron conduits. Chapter 147. Uchiha Kagami's body was like a black hole in the depths of the universe, instantly swallowing all the Tetsu in his body. Surprisingly, Uchiha Kagami's scarlet Mangekyo Sharingan flashed a little human-like light, and his cold skin slowly rose in temperature, showing a little warmth. However, what was even more incredible was that Uchiha Kagami was breathing. Otsutsuki Hagura looked at the scene in front of her with surprise, and the shock in her beautiful eyes couldn't be concealed. Uchiha Kagami didn't look dead at all. He looked like a vegetable who had lost his will. There's no need to be surprised, even if it's resurrecting him, it won't be difficult. Dustless chuckled. This was just a simple use of the yin-yang release, and if Dustless wanted to, he could directly use the Rinnegan's forbidden jutsu, Geto, Rinnegan, to resurrect Uchiha Kagami, so this was just a trivial matter for Dustless. This appearance should be fine, right? Uchiha Kagami's voice was full of vitality, and he didn't look like a dead body at all. He was obviously an unusually strong young man, full of vitality and sunshine. Ever since Uzumaki Nagato created the 6 Paths of Pain, he used the powerful eye power of the Rinnegan to successfully kill the former leader of the Rain Village, Hanzo the Salamander, who was known as the Demigod. Since then, he began to occupy the Rain Village in the name of God. The orange young man looked down at the misty scenery outside the window. His purple pupils were emotionless, and the mysterious black lines that surged out of his body were deathly still. This person was cold and emotionless, wearing a black robe embroidered with dark red clouds, and the wind and waves from afar would avoid this young man. It was Yahiko Tendo. Conan, have you investigated the origin of the 2 masked men? Yahiko asked indifferently without turning his head. His tone had no human emotion, just like the black iron rods embedded in his body, like a machine. I'm sorry, Nagato, I'm afraid I'll disappoint you again. Hearing this, Conan smiled bitterly. The 2 masked men were naturally Dustless and Obito, but both of them were mysterious existences who came and went without a trace. Not to mention investigating their origin, it was difficult to even find their traces. In the past few years, Conan has been secretly investigating Dustless and Obito, especially Dustless. She felt that she had seen Dustless in the past, and every time she saw Dustless, she had a sense of déjà vu. Sure, those 2 guys are the most troublesome existences. Although he had already expected Conan's answer, Daohiko Mitian couldn't help but frown slightly. Whether it was Wuchen or Obito, both of them seemed to have fallen from the sky without leaving any trace. This kind of person was the most difficult to deal with. There, Conan thought. Conan pondered. Conan replied after pondering for a while. Although she didn't know the specific purpose of Wuchen and Obito, at least they were allies now. Well, let's not worry about them for the time being. Yahiko nodded, as Conan said before. Whether it was Dustless or Obito, at least they were now in the same boat. After a while, the atmosphere suddenly became silent. Both Conan and Yahiko were silent. What a rare scene. The space beside Yahiko suddenly distorted, like a spring in the deep sea, and soon, a mysterious man wearing a mask and black clothes came out of it, wearing an orange spiral mask and a thin body. It was Uchiha Obito. Don't tell me you don't even know how to deal with people? Conan's pretty face turned ugly when she saw Obito's sudden intrusion. The cold light in her eyes disappeared in a flash, and a sullen expression appeared on her face. Her delicate face was filled with coldness, like a blooming snow lotus. Obviously, she didn't like Obito very much. You're really unreasonable. We're allies now, but when that guy appeared, you didn't like him so much, Conan. Ignoring Conan's angry face, Uchiha Obito said bluntly, and the guy he was talking about was naturally Wuchen. You. Conan was startled. Her pretty face was very unnatural. She looked at Obito angrily and said coldly, he's different from you, a walking corpse. I'm afraid you can't convince yourself with these words. Obito smiled faintly, then he looked back at Pain, who was still expressionless, and walked straight towards him. Did Uchiha Itachi agree? Without looking at Obito, Yahiko's voice was always so cold, isolated from the world, as if it came from a different space, incompatible with the world in front of him. Not for the time being, I still need a fire. Obito was obviously used to Yahiko's tone, so he just replied faintly. Obviously, his plan to kidnap Itachi was blocked. In that case, after a moment of silence, Pain's eyes flashed with a cold light, and his whole body was filled with killing intent. Then punish him in the name of God. A mere chess piece dares to call himself a god. Ridiculous. Under the mask, Obito raised the corner of his mouth and immediately said indifferently, "That's not necessary, just let nature take its course. I believe that Konoha's higher-ups will soon make a move on the Uchiha." Little did they know that the content of the conversation between Uchiha Obito and Tendo Yahiko fell into the ears of dust in the distance. Let nature take its course. Ridiculous, I only believe in changing fate. Then let me design a script for you in advance, my stupid brother Uchiha Itachi. Chapter 148. A black shadow shuttled through the dense forest at an extremely fast speed, and it was impossible to capture its movement trajectory. Its speed was completely beyond the range of human vision. That kid hasn't opened his Manjikyu Sharingan yet. The figure shuttling through the dense forest was Uchiha Kagami, and his speed was extremely fast. As the controller, Dustless was naturally still far away in the Rain Village, using his powerful eyes to control Kagami's movements. I didn't expect that Kid Itachi hasn't opened his Manjikyu Sharingan. In other words, Uchiha Shursui is still alive. Dustless, who was far away in the Rain Village, was thinking calmly. Suddenly, a bright light flashed in his heart, and his eyes suddenly opened, flashing with a burning light. After thinking for a while, a huge plan suddenly took shape in his heart. In that case, let me help you open your Manjikyu Sharingan. Dustless's mouth curled into a cold smile. The way to open his Manjikyu Sharingan is extremely simple and straightforward. As long as Itachi sees his loved ones, die in front of him, he will open his Manjikyu Sharingan. Now, Itachi has 3 Tomo Sharingan. In other words, as long as his loved ones die in front of him, he will open his Manjikyu Sharingan. Konoha, it's been a long time. The huge village in front of him came into view, and Dustless smiled through Kagami's vision. He had to sigh that Konoha's ninjas were the most resilient. In just a few years, Konoha came back from the dead, and was even more prosperous and powerful than before. However, perhaps because of the previous sneak attack by Wuchen and Obito, Konoha was particularly vigilant about the surrounding environment. There were 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. The layers of security were very strict, and there were many large defensive enchantments. However, these barriers were a simple matter for Dustless, and he easily invaded the interior of Konoha and rushed to the Uchiha's base at full speed. A large number of clansmen gathered at the Naka shrine of the Uchiha clan. Many members of the Uchiha clan looked cautious and nervous. Most of the people here were the elite ninjas of the Uchiha clan. Naturally, they were on the side of the Uchiha clan. Of course, there were some special existences among them. The young man, who looked quite similar to Uchiha Kagami, intentionally or unintentionally glanced at Fugaku, who was sitting on the main seat. Sometimes, he looked around at the angry members of the Uchiha clan, and his shining eyes dimmed. These fools only think about fighting for power and profit all day long. The young man was Uchiha Shursui. Due to the fact that Dustless had taught Shursui before, he also made a lot of contributions during the 3rd Shinobi World Conference. That's how he got the title, Instant Body Shursui. To some extent, it was Dustless who created Shursui. Of course, it also had a lot to do with his own sweat and effort. Shursui sighed in his heart, cursing these people for being blinded. Even if the Uchiha clan really repels the higher-ups of Konoha and gets the position of Hokage, will the noble clans in the village support Madara? There's no need to think about it, obviously they won't. It seems that I can only use that jutsu to change his mind. Staring at Fugaku on the main seat, Shursui suddenly made a decision in his heart. He planned to use the strongest genjutsu in his Mangekyo, Kodo Amatsukami, to tamper with Fugaku's thoughts. Only in this way can he stop the Uchiha from going berserk. Everyone. At this time, Uchiha Fugaku opened his eyes and waved his hand with great momentum, and the noise in the hall immediately stopped. The higher-ups of Konoha have completely torn their faces. We can only resist. If we don't resist, we will be directly slaughtered. A few years ago, the Kyuubi attacked us, and Sarutobi has already poured dirty water on our heads. Uchiha Fugaku's voice was full of reason, and his speech was full of exaggeration. At the same time, he didn't forget to look at the emotional changes of the people around him from the corner of his eyes. Seeing that everyone was angry and had a common enemy, Fugaku couldn't help but laugh proudly, and then he raised his arms and shouted, "The only way out for the Uchiha is to resist and take over the position of Hokage, then the entire village will belong to the Uchiha clan." Fugaku sure sway. Hearing this, many Uchiha ninjas praised Fugaku for his great wisdom, and some of them even put Fugaku in the same position as Madara. Fugaku was worthy of being an old fox. He was very smart to incite the sympathy of these people. In the face of the rich resources of Konoha, no one was not tempted. Sure enough, Fugaku Uchiha is an ambitious man. It seems that only by using Kodo Amatsukami will I be able to change your mind and make you completely loyal to the village. Uchiha Shursui clenched his fists and made a decision. When the meeting is dissolved, he will use Kodo Amatsukami on Uchiha Fugaku to change his mind. How can I let you succeed? Shursui's mouth curled into a cold smile, and his eyes shot a cold light directly towards Fugaku. If Fugaku's mind is really changed by this kid, although the Uchiha clan will not be able to avoid the destruction of Konoha, maybe something unexpected will happen. With the passage of time, the Uchiha clan meeting ended quickly. It can be said that it was perfect. Most people agreed with Fugaku's point of view, and chose to seize the position of Hokage through conspiracy. To make it clear, it was a coup d'état. Inside the Naka shrine, the crowd quickly dispersed. Fugaku also turned around and left with his guards. Naturally, Shursui also secretly followed him. This kid naturally wanted to find a secluded place where he could release Kodo Amatsukami on Fugaku. Seeing this scene, the people in the Rain Village suddenly sneered, and their pupils suddenly burst out with horror. Shursui, who was controlled by Dustless, suddenly burst out with strong killing intent. His Sharingan also changed, suddenly turning into a purple Rinnegan. Chapter 149. There is no doubt that Uchiha Shursui is a righteous person. His vision and heart are beyond the narrow clan doctrine, which is rare in the world of shinobi. This is very similar to his father, Uchiha Kagami. In the depths of the dark forest, Dustless controlled Kagami to flash like a ghost, shuttling through the dense forest, controlling the weight of his body to an unparalleled degree. Even if his body fell on a branch as thin as a willow branch, he could jump up and quickly chase after the two figures in front of him. Uchiha Shursui, the kid from back then, can already stand on his own. Dustless suddenly remembered when he was still in Konoha. At that time, Uchiha Shursui was just a little kid. Now, after a few years, not only has he successfully awakened the Manjikyu Sharingan, but his strength is also quite good. This really made Dustless sigh at the impermanence of the world. But those who stop me will die. Dustless's mouth was cold, and his whole body was overflowing with cold air. If Shursui really uses Kodo Amatsukami to change Fugaku's mind, then the whole plan will be completely destroyed. His speed is quite good, worthy of the body flicker Shursui. Seeing Shursui's speed as fast as lightning, almost instantly catching up with Fugaku, Dustless smiled slightly. He taught Shursui a lot about the body flicker technique. Shursui? Looking at Uchiha Shursui, who suddenly appeared in front of him, Fugaku frowned slightly. Then he relaxed and showed a kind smile as he said with a light chuckle, "I was wondering who it was. What's the matter?" Uchiha Fugaku smiled calmly, giving the feeling of a cool breeze, without the slightest hint of a schemer, which made Shursui hesitate for a while. Fugaku has always been good to him, even better than his son, Itachi. If he mercilessly uses Kodo Amatsukami to change Fugaku's mind, then he really can't do it. Patriarch, please take back your order. The Uchiha should coexist peacefully with Konoha. Clenching his teeth, the hesitation in Shirsue's eyes was replaced by determination as he looked at Fugaku and said firmly, "The Uchiha clan is digging its own grave." Shirsue's cold and indifferent voice undoubtedly showed his position. Hearing this, the gentle smile on Fugaku's face suddenly stiffened, and he looked at Shirsue with uncertainty. This kid has the Mangekyo Sharingan and can be said to be the current combat power of the Uchiha clan. If Fugaku is not optimistic about the future of the Uchiha clan, then maybe the Uchiha clan will be completely destroyed. Foolish Shirsue. Fugaku scolded coldly. Since the incident a few years ago, the higher-ups of Konoha have been treating us coldly, and they can't wait to get rid of us as soon as possible. Haven't you seen the situation of the Uchiha clan over the years? Fugaku sneered. Also, even if I really give up this plan, do you think that the higher-ups of Konoha will let the Uchiha clan go? I'm sorry to tell you that this is impossible. Although Fugaku's words were a bit fierce, what he said was indeed an undeniable fact. Even if the Uchiha clan is really sincere in serving Konoha, with the existence of a character like Shimura Danzo, the Uchiha clan won't be safe and sound. Patriarch, you only need to answer my question, whether you will give up this rebellion or not, and I will naturally solve other problems. Shirsue looked at Fugaku with a blank expression, and the Sharingan in his eyes was spinning rapidly. As long as Fugaku refuses his proposal, Shirsue will not hesitate to use Kodo Amatsukami to change Fugaku's mind. I'm sorry, but I won't accept your conditions even if I'm torn to pieces. As long as we resist Konoha, it will be a shortcut for the Uchiha clan. Fugaku's eyes were filled with wisdom, and at the same time, his three-tomo Sharingan began to spin. He knew that the next battle would be hard. Several guards also surrounded Fugaku and stared at Shirsue. Shirsue's instant body flicker is not a joke, and perhaps in just a moment, their heads will fall to the ground. In that case, under the horrified gaze of Fugaku and the others, Shirsue's Mangekyo flashed and stared at Fugaku's sluggish eyes, and the Mangekyo emitted a strong fluctuation of eye power. Koto Amatsukami. Not good. Feeling the horrifying eye power of Shirsue, Fugaku's face changed dramatically, and his whole body became cold, and a huge spiritual force invaded his mind, causing him to faint instantly. Boom. However, at this moment, a strange black figure shuttled, and it was extremely fast, and it easily kicked Obito, and the huge force kicked Shirsue dozens of feet away. One step too late? Looking at Fugaku on the ground, Kagami frowned, and Dustless's face became gloomy. For the sake of our old friendship, I wanted to let you go, but it seems that I have to take your eyes to change Fugaku's will. Thinking of this, Dustless controlled Kagami's eyes to jump with a cold light, and the only way to change Fugaku's will is to use Kodo Amatsukami or Izanami. However, the price of using Izanami is too great, and it's definitely not something Dustless can afford. Although Dustless can control Kagami's eyes, as long as he takes Shirsue's eyes, he can change Fugaku's will again. Who the hell are you? Shirsue's face was ugly as he looked at the man in black with a very familiar feeling. Hearing this, the corner of Dustless's mouth curled into a playful smile, then he turned his head, revealing half of his face, looking at Shirsue with a cold expression. My stupid son, don't you even recognize your own father? Chapter 150. Shirsue looked sluggishly at the face that was similar to his own. It was undoubtedly his father, Uchiha Kagami. However, after a moment of shock, Shirsue quickly recovered. His father entered the kingdom of heaven many years ago. It's not father, that is to say. Shirsue's face suddenly turned pale, and an endless cold aura floated from his body. Even the air around him was completely frozen and shattered. Since it's a puppet, but a puppet that can breathe, it's really rare. Shirsue's Mangekyo Sharingan stared at the smiling Uchiha Kagami, and his face was full of disbelief. The puppet in front of him was too lifelike, and no one would believe it if he said that it was a normal human being. It's just a puppet, but not only does it have the ability to breathe, especially the bright eyes of Uchiha Kagami, which has the effect of passing off as the real thing, I'm afraid that people who don't know whether Uchiha Kagami is dead or alive will think that the person in front of them is alive. You dare to desecrate my father's body, I will kill you. The scarlet-red Manjikyu Sharingan glared at Uchiha Kagami, and he glared at Dustless who was controlling Kagami, and his killing intent was constantly bursting out of his body. Obviously, Kagami was completely out of control. You think you can kill me? Kagami sneered at Shisui, and he was thinking about which eye he should take, and it didn't matter whether Shisui agreed or not. Body flicker technique. Whoosh! In just a short time, Shisui appeared behind Kagami, and the sharp katana reflected an extremely cold light as it swept towards Kagami. Your speed is good, but it's still a bit slow. Suddenly, a golden light flashed from his body, and the dazzling golden luster dotted around his body, turning into a strong and thick rib that easily blocked the fatal blow. Is this Kensusunu? Shisui's eyes narrowed slightly, and he instantly burst a distance away, and stared at Kagami's dark eyes, and immediately felt the golden light of the evil chakra, and his heart couldn't help but sink. To be able to release Susunu with ordinary eyes, who is the one controlling father behind the scenes? Shisui looked at Kagami's dark eyes with a heavy expression, and his heart fell to the bottom, and he couldn't help but wonder who was controlling Kagami behind the scenes. Kensusunu is a ninjutsu that can't be used casually, and there are many restrictions, and the person behind it can control the puppet to use Kensusunu at will. It can be seen that he also has the same Manjikyu Sharingan, and obviously, his eye's power has reached an unfathomable level. Do you want to hand me your eyes, Kagami? Shisui, and Shishijui, and the golden sword in his hand, and the golden sword in his hand and golden sword in his. Well, don't underestimate me, and you're not the only one who can use that technique. Kensusunu. Green chakra overflowed from Kagami's body, and strong ribs impressively formed, and a strong defense suddenly formed, and the afterglow spread out and wrapped around Shisui, looking extremely strong. Puchi. The golden light directly penetrated the absolute defense that seemed like an iron tower, and Shisui's body started to bleed. How is this possible? Looking at the blood on his abdomen, Shisui's face was particularly shocked, and although he instinctively dodged, he was still injured by the sword. How is this possible? Hearing this, Shisui's dark eyes flashed with contempt, and he said, in the face of absolute power, any ninjutsu in the world is futile. Kensusunu's strength is beyond doubt, but it also varies from person to person. If the opponent is a strength-type player like Hashirama, then no matter how strong Kensusunu is, he can only look at the dust. However, if the opponent is someone like the 5 Kages, then it's godlike ninjutsu for them. Deceiving the masses with your lies. Looking coldly at Shisui sneered, and the green chakra erupted again, and the ribs that were broken by Dustless were repaired. More majestic chakra wrapped around the thick bones, and after a few breaths of time, the giant chakra was exposed to the air. It was the mature Kensusunu of Uchiha Shisui. The green giant was wrapped in an extremely cold aura, and it looked ferocious. It held a drill-like weapon in its huge hand, and the sharp tip made people tremble unconsciously. Too small. Seeing this, Uchiha Kagami shook his head, or to put it simply, Dustless, who was controlling Uchiha Kagami, didn't care about it at all. The gap between the mature form and the ultimate form of Susunu is completely dimensional. It seems that you can't hand over your eyes. So, I can only take them myself. Dustless's eyes suddenly shot out a cold light, and the pupils of Dustless in the Rain Village instantly distorted rapidly, and unprecedented fluctuations of eye power shot out from his eyes. Shisui's pupils changed naturally, and the deep black eyes turned into purple Rinnegan. The mysterious black lines spread out like water ripples, and there were 9 clear dark black tomo hanging on it, which was particularly attractive. That's... Kensusunu's Shisui looked at Shisui's right eye sluggishly. He never heard that his father had this mysterious black tomo hanging on his eyes. Don't be so surprised, I'll let you feel the ultimate power of the Rinnegan. Kagami looked at Shisui inside the Susunu with a sinister smile. His eyes were fixed on the Susunu, and a cold smile appeared on his face. Mahabharata. Chapter 151. Mahaharoya. Kagami's left eye suddenly stared at Shursui inside Kansusanu, and the Sharingan in his left eye rippled, and the 9 tomo hanging on the black lines trembled slightly. What kind of jutsu is this? Uchiha Shursui, who was in the mature Susanoo, looked at Uchiha Kagami as if he was facing a great enemy. Especially when he saw the purple eyes with the 9 tomo, he had a bad feeling in his heart that he had never felt before. It was like being stared at by a prehistoric beast. It's definitely not an ordinary jutsu, it must be, boom. Boom. Shursui's voice inside the Susanoo hasn't fallen yet, when a strong repulsive force came head-on, and an unprecedented heavy blow directly swallowed the Susanoo. The seemingly mighty Kansusanu was instantly torn apart. Puff! Blood splashed in midair, and looking up, it was Shursui who was hit by the repulsive force. His whole body was covered in blood, and his clothes were all stained with blood. He didn't seem to have the strength to fight anymore, but some people can't be judged by common sense. Even so, Shursui still struggled to stand up. Are your eyes the legendary Rinnegan? Looking at Kagami's left eye, Shursui's eyes were filled with understanding. A long time ago, there were legends of the 3 great dojutsu in the ninja world. Yes, you know the Rinnegan through ninjutsu. Although the legend of the Rinnegan has been passed down since ancient times, but in the end, there are very few people who really understand it, and the difference between Dustless's Rinnegan and the ordinary Rinnegan is quite big. It's true. It's easy to recognize. Hearing this, Shursui's mouth raised a bitter smile and said in despair, such an eye can't be the Byakugan, and naturally it can't be the Sharingan. Although there is a big difference between your eyes and the legendary Rinnegan, it still retains the shape of the Rinnegan to a large extent. That's true. Kagami nodded. Although Uchiha Shursui's statement was just an inference, it was true. If the 9 tomo were removed from the eyes, there wouldn't be much difference between the eyes and the Rinnegan. A character like you shouldn't be interested in Uchiha. I don't think he has any relationship with you. Shursui pointed at Fugaku, who had fainted, and said to Dustless with a rosy complexion on his face. Mahaharoya's frontal attack, and you can still hold on until now, not bad. Kagami nodded slightly. The essence of Mahaharoya is actually similar to Amaterasu. It releases a strong repulsive force at the focus of the pupil, and it can be positioned at will. In fact, it's not much different from Madara's wheel grave, border prison. However, Kagami can naturally see that Shursui has reached the end of his life. You can't say that, he's an important part of my script. Kagami replied with a faint smile, and then looked at Shursui with a cold expression. As long as I take your Sharingan, I can change his will again. Then it won't be long before the Uchiha clan is completely destroyed. Kagami's mouth raised into a gloomy smile. Shursui's previous use of Kodo Amatsukami to tamper with Fugaku's will did indeed cause him a lot of trouble. But now, as long as he takes his Sharingan, he can use Kodo Amatsukami to change Fugaku's will again. Although I don't know what your purpose is, I won't let you succeed. Shursui's eyes were full of determination, and his face was resolute. He loved Konoha, and he was willing to sacrifice his life to protect the Uchiha clan. A sad ant crushed by the wheel of fate, you can't change the outcome of the Uchiha clan's destruction. Looking at Uchiha Shursui's determined face with disdain, Mirror's face was full of sarcasm. Now, Shursui's body was full of gold and jade, almost all of his internal organs were shattered by the Mahaharoya, and it won't be long before he dies. I know, you want nothing more than to take my Sharingan, to reactivate Kodo Amatsukami, and change Fugaku's will again. Uchiha Shursui smiled faintly. He could see through this point, and immediately his face became gloomy. Then, this is the only way to protect Uchiha and the village. Puchi. Under Kagami's surprised gaze, Shursui didn't show the slightest mercy, and his fingers hooked, and without hesitation he dug out his Mangekyo. Boom. Shursui's right hand suddenly burst, and the 2 soft eyeballs exploded into blood mist. Shursui looked at the scene in front of him in a daze. Everything happened so fast that he almost couldn't react. When he came back to his senses, Shursui's Manjikyu Sharingan had already turned into a bloody mist. Your personality hasn't changed, Shursui. After a long silence, Kagami sighed and looked at Shisui with a complicated expression. Looking at the shattered Manjikyu Sharingan, Kagami didn't hate Shisui, because this wasn't his fault, and it was this deformed era that caused his tragedy. Uchiha Shisui's greatness was beyond doubt. He was willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of the village, even if it was his own life. Even if Shimura Danzo took his eye, he still didn't feel any hatred or pain towards the village. Even before his death, he gave his other eye to Uchiha Itachi, hoping that he would protect the village. Shisui was a man of justice, but he was also a hero of tragedy. But this didn't change my plan, Shisui. Even without your Mangekyo Sharingan, I can still change Fugaku's will again. Chapter 152. Shisui fell to the ground powerlessly. He has lost his Manjikyu Sharingan, and he is now a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Whether he is killed or not depends entirely on Kagami's will. It's really bad. Dustless, who was controlling Kagami in the Rain Village, frowned slightly. Fugaku's will was tampered with by Kodo Amatsukami. If he doesn't change his mind back to its original state, I'm afraid that the Uchiha will really turn their hostility towards Konoha into friendship. I can only use that technique. The hesitation in his eyes quickly turned into determination. Dustless took back his dojutsu and continued to control Kagami's actions. Kagami suddenly closed his eyes, and after a while, when he opened them again, they became ordinary Sharingan. Idiot, do you think that you can stop me without your Manjikyu Sharingan? Anyway, I'm using Kagami's eyes. It's just a loss of one eye. Dustless of the Rain Village secretly sneered. It was impossible to help Fugaku by blinding his own eyes, but he could use Kagami's eyes to launch the jutsu. Uchiha Kagami, who was in the middle of the secret meeting with Uchiha Fugaku in the Naka Shrine, suddenly shouted loudly, and his 3 Tomo Sharingan suddenly connected and turned into a big pinwheel, and immediately, a strong chakra fluctuation erupted from his body and rushed straight towards Uchiha Fugaku. Fugaku, who was affected by chakra, opened his eyes in a daze and looked at Kagami in a daze. He could feel that Kagami woke him up. Izanami! Kagami's left eye suddenly jumped, and a strong dojutsu suddenly burst out, and all of his dojutsu rushed out. Fugaku's eyes were empty and gray, and he lost the ability to think like a vegetable. He just looked at Fugaku and then fainted again. Just a moment ago, Kagami used Izanami to change Fugaku's will back to his original ambitious self. It seems that your plan has failed, Shisui. Looking back at Uchiha Shisui, who was lying motionless on the ground, Kagami said faintly. The left eye that released Izanami was also completely sealed, turning into a one-eyed beast. He should be Lord Dustless. Shisui seemed to have reached the end of his life. His voice was extremely weak, he seemed to have exhausted all his strength, but his tone was full of unquestionable certainty. You're as sharp as ever, Shisui. Dustless, who was far away in the Rain Village, heard this and immediately shook his head. Uchiha Shisui used to be like this. Even if Dustless and Shisui only spent a short time together, no matter when and where, he was always so straightforward and not sloppy, and he was also very smart. If Shisui's position wasn't so firm, Dustless really wanted to take him as his subordinate. When the Golden Kansusunu appeared, I was already sure that in this era, only Dustless Sama, who died a few years ago, has that level of power. Shisui was fortunate enough to be taught by Dustless, so naturally he knew Dustless better than anyone else. Do you hate me, Shisui? With a slight sigh, Kagami didn't try to hide it, which is equivalent to indirectly controlling Dustless. His right eye, which had completely disappeared due to the activation of Izanami, opened again, revealing a clear black pupil. Naturally, it was created by Dustless using yin-yang release. I don't hate you, but now, I understand a little bit why Dustless Sama chose to leave Konoha. Shisui, who was lying on the ground, looked ordinary. His position was different, and his thoughts were different, and everything he knew was taught to him by Dustless. Where there are people, there will be darkness, and where there is darkness, there will be conflict, and where there is conflict, there will be bloodshed like this. The so-called peace doesn't exist. The essence of peace is absolute force, and if the strength of a village doesn't surpass the strength of other villages, it will be trampled. Now that he recalled what Dustless said to him, Shui felt his heart suddenly open. Konoha was peaceful, but this so-called peace was built on the pain of other countries. It was a false peace, so the so-called peace didn't exist at all. I'm happy that you can see things so clearly, Shui. His left eye suddenly turned blue, and Kagami suddenly raised his head and swept towards the distant sky. The powerful insight of the Tensigan was displayed, and the situation within a radius of tens of kilometers was clear to him. Even the slightest movement in the wind couldn't escape his eyes. A dark shadow quickly entered Dustless's line of sight. The young man was quite handsome, and his appearance was similar to Dustless's, as if they were carved from the same mold. The newcomer was wearing Konoha's Umbu uniform, and the 8 mark on his face was clearly visible, but from beginning to end, there was endless indifference, and he kept people thousands of miles away. Finally, my stupid brother, I've been waiting for you to win the Best Actor award for a long time. Retracting the Tensigan's line of sight, Kagami's mouth curled into an indifferent smile. The Best Actor award in his mouth was undoubtedly Uchiha Itachi. Looking back, he then looked at Kagami, who was still motionless and breathing weakly, and a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Now, Itachi still had 3 Tomo Sharingan, and as long as Kagami killed Shui in front of him, he could help Itachi awaken the Manjikyu Sharingan. Thank me, I actually have to do it for you. Itachi quickly came into sight. Kagami's murderous intent flashed, and suddenly a black flame jumped out of his fingertips. Looking indifferently at the half-dead Shui, he ruthlessly threw the black flame. Chapter 153. Dustless defeated Uchiha Sasuke in the system and took everything from him. There was no doubt that he also took the ability to control the Amaterasu at will. The flame in Kagami's hand was undoubtedly the Amaterasu. The moment the black flame touched Shui, it suddenly enlarged and instantly wrapped his whole body. Shui's whole body was bathed in the strange black flame. And this scene was seen by Itachi, who just arrived in time. Shinra Tensei. Seeing Itachi rushing straight towards him, Kagami shook his head, and an irresistible repulsion broke out of his body. Itachi was caught off guard and bounced back dozens of feet. Itachi was particularly weak now, like a willow branch swaying in the wind. He could only go with the flow, watching the Amaterasu constantly swallowing Shui's body. Shui! Uchiha Itachi let out a sorrowful cry as he looked at Shui, who was completely swallowed up. The 3 Tomo in his eyes surged with powerful dojutsu fluctuations, turning into the Manjikyu Sharingan in the shape of a windmill. This should be considered as fulfilling your wish. Shui, go in peace. Kagami turned his head and looked at Shui with no expression. Far away in the rain village, Dustless's eyes dimmed. The relationship between Shui and Itachi was well known, and he was reluctantly helping Itachi. As expected of Uchiha Itachi. Noticing the unusual fluctuations in Itachi's eyes, Kagami nodded slightly in appreciation. Looking at Itachi's murderous face, he shrugged helplessly and smiled. I am the benefactor who helped you open the Manjikyu Sharingan. Now, instead of thanking me, you are staring at me like you want to eat me. It's really Amaterasu. Suddenly, a dark flame appeared on Kagami's body, just like the Amaterasu that appeared on Shui's body. It seems that this kid's vengeful heart is quite strong, and he intends to kill him in the same way. You really don't understand human feelings. Uchiha Kagami's frivolous voice came from the fire that was devoured by the Amaterasu. His tone sounded like he was in pain, and he seemed to be mocking Itachi for overestimating himself. Immediately, he walked out of the black fire safely with a frivolous expression. What a strange ability to absorb the Amaterasu. Itachi's incomparably calm face was full of surprise, and his heart was silent. He cautiously looked at Kagami, who walked out of the fire with the Amaterasu burning on his shoulder, secretly thinking about the ability of the person in front of him. Well, let's play, let's see how many tricks you have. Looking at the bloodstains from the corner of Itachi's eyes due to using Amaterasu, Keiji's Tensigen directly swept towards Itachi and saw the internal situation of Itachi's body clearly. It's Kagami's eyes. Kagami? That's Through the high-density observation of the Tensigen, Kagami found that Itachi's body was normal, and the reason why he got sick later was probably because of the excessive use of the Manjikyu Sharingan. Itachi can be said to be the most abnormal and most unreasonable member of the Uchiha family in history. Ken Susanoo was the only one who had 3 generations of artifacts. Once he merged with the Manjikyu Sharingan and gave birth to the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, his ultimate body Ken Susanoo would be the most powerful. The gap between us is too big, and you're not my opponent. Kagami stared at Itachi's cautious face, smiled slightly, and immediately said, "Come on, let me see how strong you are." Hearing this, Itachi just looked at Dustless with a blank face, and his pupils were as calm as stagnant water. He didn't look like a person who was in a desperate situation at all. The windmill-like Manjikyu Sharingan rotated rapidly, and his pupils set off stormy waves. Tsukuyami! The smiling Uchiha Kagami's pupils instantly turned gray and lost their color. He looked like a walking corpse, as if his soul had been taken away. Is this the burden of the Manjikyu Sharingan? It's really a self-destructive eye. The stinging pain in his eyes made Itachi feel like dying, especially when he used the Amaterasu. An unprecedented sense of mental exhaustion poured into his body, and his strength and bones seemed to be taken away, making him feel like he was about to collapse. But fortunately, I killed him. Looking at Uchiha Kagami's gray pupils, Itachi breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he used the unexpected Tsukuyami to deal with him. Otherwise, a fierce battle would have been inevitable. Kill me? Do you think you can kill me with this genjutsu? You're so naive that it makes me feel sad, Itachi. A dark shadow blocked the sun, and Itachi was slightly startled. He suddenly looked up and saw Uchiha Kagami, who appeared in front of him unscathed. Lightspeed kick. Boom. Itachi, who didn't react, flew out like a cannonball. The destructive force broke countless trees behind him and pulled out a long ditch. You want to defeat me with a mere genjutsu? Ridiculous. Kagami looked at Itachi with interest and nodded slightly. Just now, he used the ability of the Manjikyu Sharingan's right eye, Omniscient, to ignore Itachi's Tsukuyami. In front of Omniscient, no ability in the world is effective against him. Only physical attacks work, no matter what kind of genjutsu it is. His reaction is quite fast. Feeling a slight numbness in his feet, Kagami's eyes flashed with a touch of surprise, and immediately looked at the fiery red chakra wrapped around Itachi's body, and calmed down again. Just now, it was obvious that he summoned Susanoo to block Dustless's heavy blow for him. Chapter 154. Uchiha Itachi, who was flying upside down, raged the surrounding terrain like a harvester, easily pulling out hundreds of meters of narrow ditches. However, due to the powerful defense of Susanoo, although Itachi was injured, it wasn't fatal and didn't get in the way. Poof! What a powerful force. The blood in his lungs was boiling, and the red blood directly broke out of his mouth and sprinkled all over the void. Uchiha Itachi's face was particularly ugly, and he subconsciously touched his chest. Maybe if he didn't react quickly just now, he might have been broken by Dustless's kick. At this moment, it was not impossible for his soul to return to the sky. He slowly stood up, brushed off the fresh soil on his body, and his calm eyes fell on Kagami. The coldness in his pupils condensed into ice, and a cold, killing intent emerged. In this case, I can only meet force with force. After saying that, Uchiha Itachi's body surged with crimson chakra. The deep color was as enchanting as blood, wrapping his whole body tightly. It was like a strong iron bucket that could defend against any attack. Chakra continued to gush out, and the momentum didn't stop. The bones formed before seemed to be alive, constantly absorbing chakra from Itachi's body, strengthening their own body, and rapidly expanding. He's really desperate. Looking at Itachi releasing his chakra without restraint, Kagami frowned slightly. This kid is supposed to die young. If his lifespan is reduced because of this battle, it's definitely going to reduce his lifespan. Ow, a deafening roar sounded, like a thunder on the ground, awakening Dustless from his contemplation. Looking up, he saw a fiery red halo covering the sky, and the sunlight projected from Kensusunoo had a feeling of being eroded by evil. His entire body was covered in crimson flames that seemed to come from the red lotus karmic fire of hell, destroying all matter that came into contact with it. The giant held an incomparably sharp greatsword in one hand and an incomparably sturdy shield in the other. It gave the feeling of a fearless god of war, despising everything. This looks pretty good. Kagami's eyes swept over Kensusunoo's body, and a faint ripple appeared in his eyes. He felt that Kensusunoo was barely acceptable. At least, it looked much stronger than Shirsue's Kensusun. It could attack and defend, especially with a long-range attack weapon like Yasaka's Magatama. Overall, Uchiha Itachi's Susanoo is the most perfect. The only pity is that this seemingly invincible Susanoo is not the ultimate form, and it is inevitable that there will be some flaws. With a touch of coldness in his eyes, Kagami waved his hand, and a powerful golden beam swept straight towards Kensusunoo's eyebrows. The cold beam seemed to penetrate Itachi's head. It's useless. Seeing this, Itachi's eyes were as calm as water, and at the same time, Kensusunoo's crimson shield and Yada no Kagami blocked in front of the oncoming golden beam without fear. The golden light that seemed to penetrate everything was easily blocked by the fiery red shield, leaving only a thumb-sized burn mark on Yada no Kagami, emitting a faint white smoke. It's a good defense, I want to rob it. Kagami sincerely praised, and he coveted the absolute defense of Yada no Kagami. He couldn't help but want to use the system's ability to train Itachi and steal Kensusunoo's ability. Crazy talk. The calm eyes looked at Kagami indifferently, and 3 huge fiery red tomo condensed in his hand. The shape of the tomo was connected by a rope, quite similar to the 3 tomo Sharingan of the Uchiha clan. Yada no Magatama. Kensusunoo's big hand threw out the fiery red tomo with great power, and it felt like it could crush and strangle Kagami. It's useless, as long as I want to, this attack can't even touch me. After saying that, Uchiha Kagami's whole body was covered in a golden halo, turning into a golden giant arm holding a long sword. He stared at the 3 red tomo without fear, and the golden long sword roared down. Kensusunoo followed the mind of the caster to make any action, and it could also be used locally, such as only summoning a partial arm, palm, and other forms to fight. Whoosh! A dazzling golden light flashed in the void, and Susanoo's Tachi, which shrouded Wuchen's body, roared out, and the golden light directly penetrated the crimson flame. Kacha! The 3 tightly connected tomo were torn apart by brute force, and the uneven gap looked like it was torn apart by a fierce beast, and people couldn't help but wonder what kind of beast this masterpiece came from. Sure enough, the gap is too big. Seeing the destruction of Yasaka's Magatama, Itachi frowned slightly and secretly thought about countermeasures to deal with Kagami. However, he was helpless to find that he had no means to suppress Kagami. The so-called strategy played no role in the face of absolute power, and it would only make him a laughingstock. If you don't come, I'll attack. Seeing that Itachi didn't move, Kagami took the initiative to attack, and his whole body burst out in a rainbow light, and the harsh roar blew the air to the horizon. So fast! Itachi's pupils suddenly shrank, and he immediately controlled Kensusunoo's sword of Tatsuka to slash at Kagami, and the falling cold light seemed to delay the speed of Kagami's attack. Stupid thing, now I'll let you understand how big the gap between us is. You can't fight me with the weak eyes of the Mangekyo, never. Chapter 155. His pupils dilated, and the Rinnegan in his left eye flashed again, and 9 dark tomo hung on the black coil, giving people a feeling of extreme mystery. Kagami's speed was extremely fast, like a gust of wind, and he couldn't be touched. Kagami's left eye's sight fell down, and on the blade, a strong repulsive force suddenly surged in his pupils, and the 9 tomo also trembled fiercely. Mahabharata! Boom! The irresistible powerful repulsive force broke out again, and the location of the explosion was Kansusanu holding the Tatsuka sword. The strong wave spread to the sky like an endless wave, and Kansusanu, who was at the center of the explosion, was directly swallowed. Kansusanu's huge body was instantly dismembered, destroyed by the unparalleled overbearing repulsive force, and completely wiped out. Because the power was too terrifying, it simply wiped out all the flowing matter in the surrounding air, forming a large vacuum area, and even in an instant, space was distorted by brute force, causing a large area of space-time reflux, and then space collapsed. As for Uchiha Itachi, he had completely fainted, and his breath was weak, but he was still alive. Of course, this was the result of Kagami's intention. Finally, it's done. Looking at the half-dead Uchiha Itachi lying on the ground, Dustless, who was far away in the rain village, smiled as if he had succeeded in his plot. He breathed a sigh of relief. This is barely on the right track. I'm afraid it won't be long before you agree to the conditions of Konoha's higher-ups and choose to go undercover inside the Akatsuki, and that kid Uchiha Obito seems to have promised you that he won't do anything to Konoha. Carefully recalling the memories of his previous life, he realized that Uchiha Itachi would soon betray Konoha and embark on the road of no return. Well, Kagami's huge perceptions spread out like a tide, and suddenly felt that the surrounding environment was not right, and some ripples flashed in his eyes, and his face was full of surprise. It turned out to be him. After carefully sensing the surroundings, he suddenly realized that a large number of powerful ninjas were rushing over, and the one leading them was the leader of the Root Division, Shimura Danzo. In fact, Shisui should have been dealt with by Shimura Danzo. The reason why Uchiha Jin replaced Danzo was that Shisui used Kotoamatsukami on Fugaku Uchiha, so he had no choice but to act. Leave the two of them here. Even if Danzo is brave, he won't dare to kill them. Taking a glance at Fugaku and the unconscious Itachi, Kagami thought to himself. One is the patriarch, and the other is the son of the patriarch. If Shimura Danzo killed them both, it will inevitably cause a backlash from the other clans. No one wants Konoha to have a lawless person who dares to kill the patriarchs of other clans. Then, he took a deep look at Itachi, and a strange smile appeared on his face. From now on, this kid will probably be very persistent with him. This also paved the way for Itachi to enter the Akatsuki. Because Kagami is now wearing the Akatsuki's uniform, if Itachi wants to investigate him, he must choose to join the Akatsuki. Your life is a puppet on the front stage, and I am the person behind you. Sun Wukong will never be able to escape from the palm of the Buddha. Finally, Kagami withdrew his gaze from Itachi, and his body flashed with a golden luster, and as if tearing the space apart, he directly drilled into it and disappeared completely. 1 month later, in the rain village, the sky was hazy and hazy. That guy Orochimaru should have agreed to join the Akatsuki, right? In the secret room with dirty light, Wu Chen, who was wearing a mask, looked at Obito. His eyes flashed with a thick light, and then he asked indifferently. Indeed, but Orochimaru didn't have good intentions. He wanted to take Yahiko's Rinnegan, but he was defeated by Pain's Rikudo, so he agreed to join the Akatsuki. Obito said, and it seemed that he was extremely disdainful of Orochimaru's conspiracy, and he ridiculed. Orochimaru's ambition is not small. He was very coveting Uchiha's Sharingan, and now seeing the Rinnegan above the Sharingan and the Byakugan, it's impossible for him not to have evil thoughts. It's Uzumaki Nagato who is useless. Dustless curled his lips under the mask, and he was extremely disdainful of Uzumaki Nagato. Since he had the Rinnegan, many people had ideas about him. At first, it was Dustless himself, then it was the former leader of the Rain Village, Hanzo the Salamander, and now it was Orochimaru. He's really not good. With his body like that, he can't exert the power of the Rinnegan at all. On this point, Obito and Dustless's views were quite similar. They both thought that Uzumaki Nagato was not good. Others only needed to use chakra to activate the power of the Rinnegan, But Uzumaki Nagato had to go all out. This is also the reason why they didn't match. After all, the owner of the Rinnegan was Madara, so Uzumaki Nagato was naturally more difficult to use. But then again, staring at Dustless, Obito said, Uchiha Itachi of Konoha has agreed to join the Akatsuki, and in exchange he will destroy the Uchiha, but his condition is that he can't attack Konoha and the Kyuubi's. Promise him, Obito, the other half of the Kyuubi has been bound by me in the Gedo Mazo. Even without the Yang Chakra of the Kyuubi, it doesn't matter. Dustless waved his hand and said resolutely, the chakra of the Kyuubi will not be a big deal, and the Jubi can still be resurrected as usual. Moreover, Dustless's ambition is not the so-called Jubi's Jinchuriki. For him, becoming the Jubi's Jinchuriki is meaningless. The so-called different realm, people's vision also changes. Today, Dustless just wants to replace Kagaya, or completely devour her, not become the so-called Jinchuriki. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.